The island Sunny was resting on was a strange one. It was rather large and covered in soft grass, with ancient stone columns protruding from the ground here and there. Most of them had long toppled and been shattered to pieces by some unknown disaster. The ground itself was full of depressions and generally uneven, as if it had served as a battlefield for giants once. The reason why Sunny had come up with such a metaphor was not coincidental. The main feature of the island was situated at its center and appeared to be a giant, rusty metal hand. Hence, the isle was unimaginatively called the Iron Hand Island. It was well known to the awakened anchored in the sanctuary because very few nightmare creatures ever came here. Thus, many humans used it to rest during their journeys. However, today Sunny wasn't the only visitor to the peaceful island. A rather ugly monstrosity lay dead in the shadow of the giant Iron Hand, its blood forming a large pool. It had a body like that of a snake, two powerful hands protruding from a human-like torso, a head with a long and toothy muzzle, and two leathery wings. From the looks of it, the creature had landed on the island due to heavy injuries, and then succumbed to the most recent crushing. Its body seemed broken and flattened, with sharp bone splinters protruding from the torn scales. Sunny's interest was naturally piqued, because it wasn't every day that he stumbled on free soul shards. Additionally, and more intriguing, the shadow had noticed something glinting on the ground near one of the abomination's hands. Standing up, Sunny looked around and then headed to the center of the island. Soon, he reached the rusty metal arm and dove into the shadows, emerging on top of it. Standing a good 10 meters above the ground, he stared at the carcass of the dead nightmare creature to make sure that the shadow didn't miss anything. Everything seemed to be fine. With a shrug, Sunny jumped down and landed softly on the grass near the massive monster, walking around it. He approached the spot where the abomination's hand lay on the ground, its 5 long fingers ending in terrifying claws. Sunny muttered, "Gee, you were a scary one, weren't you?" He didn't need to wonder about who had done the monster in. On the chained isles, nightmare creatures constantly fought each other. Winged ones like this one were often caught by the inhabitants of the dark side, torn to pieces and devoured. This one had been relatively lucky, all things considered. Bending down, Sunny picked up the small object that seemed to have fallen out of the creature's hand and stared at it with a dubious expression. "A coin?" he asked. Indeed. He was holding a heavy golden coin, which didn't make any sense. Nightmare creatures were not exactly known for participating in commerce, and humans did not use coins. If they needed to trade, they either bartered with suitable items or used credits. Of course, credits didn't exist in the dream realm, but the transaction would be honored when both parties returned to the real world. So where could a gold coin come from? Sunny stared at the coin for a while, then turned it around. There was a depiction of an archaic ship on one of its sides with a tall mast that had an actual tree growing around it. A beautiful human face stared at him from the other side, a carefree smile on its lips. The person had high cheekbones, long hair, and exquisite features. Sunny couldn't say if they were a man or a woman, just that they seemed rather charming. There was a crescent moon drawn on their forehead, and, well, that was about it. Sunny studied the coin some more, and then thought despondently, "That thing is definitely cursed, right?" He muttered. It just had to be. What else was he supposed to think after finding a mysterious coin near the corpse of a monster that had died a violent death? But it didn't seem to be cursed. Sunny had a rather good intuition about these things. He also had the sight of a person who had inherited a part of Weaver's forbidden lineage. Looking under the surface of the coin, Sunny expected to see a malevolent spellweave, or at least something strange, but there was nothing. From the looks of it, the coins was just a coin. The only strangeness about it was that it seemed a little bit warm to the touch. Teacher Julius would have been delighted if he brought him a sketch of a genuine Dream Realm coin. Cultural artifacts like this were few and far between. It wouldn't result in Sunny receiving any contribution points, but the old man was easy to please. With a shrug, Sunny shoved the coin into his pack and turned to the dead monster. "Let's see how many shards you're hiding, ugly lizard," he grumbled. He summoned the moonlight shard, enhanced it with 2 shadows, and cut into the tough hide of the nightmare creature. For a while, luck was on his side. He quickly retrieved 2 bright soul shards, so quickly, in fact, that Sunny grew sure that there had to be a third one inside the carcass. A demon, huh? That was where his luck ended. The body of the demon was too heavily damaged, so when he tried to fish out the third crystal, its stomach burst open and spilled its contents all over the ground. Sunny let out a sharp groan of disgust and cursed. Sunny was so disgusted by the idea of being doused in the putrid, slimy mass that he instinctively teleported a few meters away. Then he tilted his head and stared down. Covered in repulsive, acidic liquid, 3 more coins, as well as something that resembled a piece of a wooden chest, lay in the quickly melting grass. Did this guy try to eat a treasure chest? Sunny wondered aloud. Sunny shook his head, walked around the disgusting mess, and quickly retrieved the last soul shard. Since golden coins were rather useless to him and he already had one to sketch, he had no intention of retrieving the rest. "No thank you," Sunny muttered dismissively. By that time, he had recovered enough shadow essence to return to the sanctuary, so nothing was holding him on the island anymore. Throwing one last look at the giant metal hand and wondering what terrible strike could have separated it from the rest of the theoretical giant, he turned away and walked toward the edge of the island. The sun was already setting, so he didn't have a lot of time left to return to the citadel and use the gateway before the morning came. Sunny just pulled what he needed from that mess and is heading back before sundown. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next episode. Soon, Sunny was walking on the last chain he had to traverse as he approached the sanctuary of Noctis. By then, it was already night. Up above, the pale disk of the crescent moon shone softly, its light reflecting off the white walls of the ivory tower. Countless stars shimmered on the dark velvet tapestry of the night sky. Without the light pollution that the giant city where Sunny had grown up produced, they were beautiful and bright. There had not been any stars on the forgotten shore as well, so this sight was still new and breathtaking to him. Now that it was night, the border between the sky above and the sky below was almost invisible. The empty void beneath the isles had stars of its own, so it seemed like the reflection of the real sky during these hours. The only difference between them was that it lacked both the moon and the ethereal silhouette of a graceful white tower floating through the clouds. The chain swayed lightly as Sunny walked. He felt reluctant to use shadow step this close to the sanctuary and enjoyed the sight of the night sky, the smell of clean air, and the cool embrace of the wind. So he tended to complete this last part of the return journey on foot. Even hell could be beautiful, sometimes. A few minutes later, Sunny heard the murmur of flowing water and knew that the sanctuary was already close. The citadel that served most awakened of the chained isles, as the home was situated on a tiny island of its own. That island, however, was rather anomalous. Unlike all others, it never rose and never fell, always remaining at a stable height away from the torturous pressure of the crushing. There was a grass field, and in its center, massive menhirs stood in a perfect circle, which encompassed another, smaller one. This larger circle formed the outer wall of the citadel, while the smaller one formed the inner. Inside the circle, there was a tranquil park with a pool of clear water in its middle. A path of stones led to a small island at the center of the pool, where in the shade of an ancient tree, an altar cut from a solid piece of white marble stood. The altar had 3 special things about it. The first one was an obsidian knife that lay on its surface. The knife did not seem very special, with the exception of the fact that no one, not even saints, was able to lift it even by a centimeter from the altar's surface. The second special thing about the altar was that it appeared to be, itself, the gateway. One simply had to touch it to be transported back to the real world. Once anchored to it, the awakened would appear near the altar when they fell asleep in reality. The third thing was that a seemingly endless stream of water flowed from the altar, feeding the pool that surrounded it. No one knew where the water came from or why the altar produced it, just that it was cold, sweet, and safe to drink. 7 streams flowed out of the pool and eventually fell over the edges of the small island, turning into water dust in the wind. On a bright day, the whole sanctuary was surrounded by rainbows. It was the murmur of these waterfalls that Sunny had heard as he approached the citadel. Using the dark wing to glide upward and land on the soft grass of the island, He walked over to a stone post that stood nearby and rang the bronze bell that hung on it. This was to let the watchman know that he was a human and not a nightmare creature that needed to be destroyed. Soon, a whistle came out of the darkness, and Sonny walked forward on a path that led to the towering menhirs. A few minutes later, he had walked between two massive stones and entered the sanctuary of Noctis. No one really knew who Noctis was, and why this place was called in their honor, if that name even belonged to a living creature. It was just what the spell called this place. So humans followed suit. In any case, the space between the two rings of menhirs had been made into a place for the awakened to rest and recuperate between their ventures into the wild expanse of the Chained Isles. The White Feather clan had built walls to close the spaces between the standing stones, and recruited several people with useful utility aspects to make living conditions better for those who chose to come here or were sent to this region by the spell. Currently, there were about 200 awakened populating the sanctuary, which was enough to keep it functioning and safe. This late at night, most people were either sleeping, resting, or had already returned to the real world, so Sonny did not meet anyone as he headed toward his assigned living quarters. Like everybody else here, he was assigned a small room after becoming anchored to the sanctuary. It was situated near one of two entrances, so he didn't have to walk for a long time, entering the room. Sonny quickly took off his pack and placed his trophies: a scattering of soul shards, a few weird-looking fruits, and the golden coin, into a chest standing near the bed. Then he threw the pack on the floor, lingered for a few moments, and left. Usually, he would have stayed until the morning and went to either the kitchens or the improvised marketplace at the park to trade the shards for memories or credits, chat with other awakened to learn the latest news and important information about the Isles, or simply relax. But today, he had to hurry to the real world. Entering the park, Sonny approached the deep pool of clear water and stepped onto the first stone of the path that led to the altar island. Soon, he was standing in front of the white altar, surrounded by the tranquil sound of rustling leaves and running water. Glancing at the obsidian dagger, Sonny resisted the urge to try and lift it. He had already done so many times before, all with no result whatsoever. Maybe one day. With a sigh, he took a step forward and placed his hand on the altar. The marble felt cool to the touch. In the next moment, the darkness of the night was momentarily illuminated by a flash of ethereal blue light. When it dissipated, there was no one standing under the branches of the ancient tree. Sonny had left the dream realm and returned to the real world. Sonny opened his eyes in the cool cradle of the sleeping pod. The lid was already sliding away, and the lights in the room were gradually turning brighter. The panoramic wall in front of him opened to a view of one of the academy parks. The eastern horizon was already painted lilac by the rising sun, but the world was still shrouded in darkness. Made it. With a sigh, he rose from the pod and lowered his feet to the cold floor. These first moments after leaving the dream realm were still strange to him. It just seemed weird to be able to escape it so easily, without having to fight through a sea of monsters and struggle against terror, desperation, and pain. How could something so meaningful be so simple? And yet it was. In the past 2 months, coming and going from the dream realm had almost become a routine for him. Not that he had done it as often as most awakened did. Standing up, Sonny grimaced, then massaged his shoulders and glanced at the sleeping pod darkly. Now that he was an awakened, the academy had granted him a personal living space in one of the dormitories. These quarters were much the same as the room he had lived in during his preparations to enter the dream realm for the first time, but with one significant difference. There was a smaller room adjacent to the main one, housing a humble meditation space and an individual sleeping pod. The problem was, that pod was not at all as advanced and state-of-the-art as the ones used for the sleepers. It did its job fine as long as an awakened remained in the dream realm for about 8 to 12 hours. As most of them did. However, Sonny was in the habit of spending much more time there. His recent adventure, for example, had lasted 3 whole days. He had to work hard to not fall behind after all. As a result, his muscles felt sore and heavy, circulating essence through his body to chase away the remnants of sleep. Sonny walked to the bathroom and got into the shower. As streams of water caressed his skin and flowed down the scales of the black serpent coiling around his lithe body, he sighed and closed his eyes for a moment. At least his mind felt refreshed. Visiting the dream realm was not exactly equal to good sleep, but it was somewhat similar. Mental fatigue still accumulated little by little, but it was easy to remove by meditating or actually sleeping on the other side of the gateway. Few awakened ever did, however. Since no place there was really completely safe, exiting the shower sometime later, Sonny finally felt wide awake and full of energy. He dressed himself, sat at the table, and quickly compiled a report about his recent exploration. Then he picked up the communicator and checked its log. No missed calls, a few messages from Effie with photos of all the delicious food she was eating and several mimetic jokes of questionable nature, and a few more from Kai. Describing his experiences in Bastion, Sonny waited for a bit, then sighed and put the communicator down. "Time for breakfast," he muttered, commanding one of the shadows to wrap itself around his body so that he appeared like a normal person. Sonny left his room and headed out. On the way to the cafeteria, he met a few other awakened. No one paid him too much attention, though. In recent months, the images and true names of Cassie, Kai, and especially Effie had been plastered all over the media, but luckily, he had avoided becoming a poster boy for the government's insatiable propaganda machine. As the result, random strangers had no idea who he was, which suited Sonny just fine. Entering the cafeteria, he got himself a full tray of food, sat at one of the tables, and placed the communicator on its surface. The call was supposed to come any minute now. He enjoyed a decadently delicious breakfast in peace and quiet. Glancing at the communicator from time to time, no one bothered him and there was no danger to be worried about. A content smile found its way to his lips. "Ah, life is good," Sonny murmured. Finally, the communicator rang. Sonny answered the call and listened to the respectful voice on the other side of it.
"Everything is ready, wonderful, so when can I? Oh really? Well, great, then I will be there at noon, right, see you later then."
Finishing the call, he put the communicator down and stared into the distance for a long time, a strange look on his face. After receiving the contribution points for his Forgotten Shore report and making some money by selling soul shards to other awakened on the Chained Isles, Sonny had done something that he had never thought that he would be able to do in this life. He had bought a home. A nice, beautiful home in the district of the city with clean air and green lawns. And now, after several long weeks of waiting, everything was finally ready for him to move in. Looking down at his cantankerous shadow, Sonny lingered for a few moments and then smiled. "I think we've made it, buddy. We really, really did," he said quietly. The person in charge of renovating his home and bringing it to the desired specifications was going to meet him there at noon, so Sonny had a few hours of free time to kill. He wandered around the parks for a bit. Now that the spring had come, the air was warm and pleasant. The melodic drip-drop of melting snow disturbed the peaceful silence of the early morning, making Sonny feel balanced and relaxed. Even the shadow seemed to enjoy this tranquil landscape. Eventually, he visited one of the kiosks scattered around the academy and spent a bit of credits to buy a bouquet of fresh flowers. Then, Sonny found himself standing in front of the hospital complex. With a sigh, he lowered his head and walked through the automatic doors. Using an elevator to reach one of the lowest levels, he passed several increasingly strict security checks and approached an unremarkable white door. Inside, it was cool and dark, changing the withered flowers with fresh ones. He lingered for a bit, then sat on a chair that stood near the softly glowing sleeping pod. Entombed within, a young woman with silver hair was dreaming soundly, her face pale and unmoving. "Hey, Nephi's, how have you been?" Sonny said softly. There was no one in the room besides the two of them. Well, Nephi's wasn't really there either. In a sense, Sonny was alone. In more senses than one, really. There were two small tables standing on both sides of the sleeping pod, each bearing a vase with fresh flowers. Sonny only ever changed flowers in one of the vases, while Cassie tended to the other. They had yet to bump into each other while visiting Neph after that first fateful day, though which suited Sonny fine. He didn't really want to see the blind girl now, or ever again. Glancing at Changing Star, Sunny sighed and kept his mouth shut. He didn't know what kinds of recording equipment were installed in the room, so his one-sided conversations with Nephi's had to happen in the safety of his mind.
I've just returned from the dream realm, spent a whole 3 days there exploring ruins and hunting down a few nightmare creatures, my shadow fragments. Well, you already know, I've been working hard to not let you leave me completely in the dust. Oh, I met a master from the White Feather clan yesterday. He seems like a nice enough guy. You would have liked him, I think.
He paused for a few moments and wondered if this was considered crazy behavior, talking to a person that wasn't really there, pretending that they were. Maybe it was. But despite how much Sunny hated to admit it, he wasn't as fine and stable as he pretended to be. He was angry, guilt-ridden, and lonely. He missed Nephi's much more than he had ever expected. Out there on the forgotten shore, she had somehow become a fundamental part of his life. It was strange to exist without her occupying a place in the same world as him. Painful. He missed Cassie, too, or rather, the version of her that had lived in his mind before everything they had turned to ashes. He missed their friendship, their camaraderie, their trust in each other. Things that had been broken and lost. Sunny sighed.
You know, these days I often think about the time we spent in the labyrinth, the 3 of us. It was a simpler time, don't you think? A wonderful time. It seemed so terrible back then, but now I miss it a lot. I wonder if you do too.
He grimaced, then looked away.
Anyway, what else? Oh, that house I bought is ready. Kai and Effie are doing fine. They are both very busy, though. I hear that Cass is doing well too. She had become the leader of those Forgotten Shore Awakened who remained independent. People are calling them the Fire Keepers. Funny, right?
Sunny lingered for a while, gathering his thoughts. I have visited your mom, by the way. I remember that you didn't like the thought of her being alone, so I went to see her. She is fine too. Well, I mean, you know, for a hollow. Oh, and the funniest part. He looked around, then thought.
Do you remember how you told us that you wanted to dye your hair? You won't believe it, but I actually bought a little memory that allows me to change the color of my hair at will. Not because of you, it's just something that I needed for a thing I'm about to do. Still, I think that it's sort of hilarious.
Nephi's remained still and absent, her ivory face looking lifeless in the white glow of the sleeping pod. He gritted his teeth. Where are you? How are you doing? Are you hurt? Are you fucking happy? I imagined that you would be free of everything, with nothing to do but slaughter nightmare creatures and battle against the thing you hate the most. Sunny looked down and clenched his fists, then remained still for a long time.
Are you coming back?
There was no answer. He sat by Changing Star's side for a while, staring at her still face. Then he nodded heavily and stood up. All right, figures. I'll see you later then, Sunny said quietly. With that, Sunny turned around and left. Exiting the academy, Sunny lingered for a bit, then turned around and looked back. The massive red gates looked very different from how they used to back when he and Nephi's walked through them 16 months ago. The space in front of them had been empty then, but now it was filled with tens of thousands of burning candles. These candles were an altar to Changing Star, after the survivors of the Forgotten Shore had returned to the real world. Their story spread like wildfire and captured humanity's attention for a few weeks. Both the independent media and the government propaganda machine added fuel to the fire, spinning it as an inspirational epic of human resilience, heroism, and sacrifice. And Nephi's, of course, was the protagonist of that epic. Most of the Forgotten Shore Awakened were her willing apostles, after all. In their hearts, she was their savior. They were also under the impression that Changing Star had become trapped in the dream realm in order to give them a chance to escape. Their voices fell into fertile soil. Nephi's already had the established mythos of the immortal Flame clan to raise her into the spotlight of glory, and with her extraordinary accomplishments on the Forgotten Shore, it only grew brighter. The thing that really elevated and exalted her, however, was something else. It was martyrdom. People loved nothing more than a martyr. Just like Sunny had said, a person had to die to become a true hero. Changing Star, however, had done something strange. She was now, somehow, neither dead nor alive, which only made the whole thing more gripping and emotional. Nephis had become a martyr without actually dying, which was, coincidentally, very fitting considering her clan's name. All of humanity was now entranced by the story of the last daughter of the legendary Immortal Flame clan. The heiress to two most prominent warriors in human history, who had been thrust into hell, stormed the citadel of a fallen terror that ruled it, and fought the creature off long enough for 100 sleepers to escape back to the real world, staying behind to ensure their survival. From the outside, she seemed like a paragon of humanity. Sunny didn't know who came up with the idea of placing candles near the gates of the academy, but it was rather ingenious. People seemed to believe that the immortal flame would not be extinguished as long as at least one candle continued to burn for changing star. So the academy had unexpectedly become a place of pilgrimage for thousands of humans who wished for her to do the impossible once again and return alive. The idea was so poignant that even Sunny himself had felt compelled to light a candle a couple of times. Zealots. With a dismissive shake of his head, he turned around and walked away, leaving the sea of candles behind. None of them really knew Nephis, only he did. She didn't need their candles to escape the dream realm. Perhaps it was the dream realm that needed help escaping from her. Sunny spent some time in a crowded carriage of a public train. Since personal transport vehicles were rare, expensive, and demanded a special government license to purchase, most people in the city used public transportation to move around. Magnetic trains, usually simply called trams, were the cheapest and most popular form of it. During his time in the outskirts, Sunny rarely had a reason to use one, but when he did, people didn't pay him any attention. Sometimes they even went out of their way to not notice him, but now things seemed to have changed. Sunny had his eyes closed, observing the carriage through the shadow in case there was danger. There wasn't. However, he was surprised to notice that people, especially young women, threw curious glances at him from time to time. Is the soul serpent showing? But no, his sleeves hid the coils of the shadow completely. Strange. Must be the clothes then. Sunny had not ventured out of the academy a lot during the past 2 months, but on one of those expeditions, he had bought himself some unassuming but pricey civilian clothes. According to Kai, they were understated and stylish, whatever that meant. Sunny basically just went for the only comfortable thing the store had in dark colors. He sighed. That just shows how shallow people are. A simple change of wardrobe and suddenly, I'm at the center of attention. Why are girls so materialistic? He grumbled. To be fair, many guys stared at him too. By the time Sunny reached his stop, he was a bit flustered. Leaving the crowded train behind, he sighed with relief, hid his hands in his pockets, and walked out of the familiar tram terminal. The part of town he came to was somewhat near its center, as far removed from the outskirts as one could imagine. It was peaceful, quiet, and green. The air was almost as fresh as that of the dream realm. The houses in this district were also the opposite of the human hive Sunny was accustomed to. Weirdly, they were all very low, no more than 2 or 3 stories high. The ground itself rose and fell in artificial tiers, each street existing on its own wide terrace. Out here, the snow was already gone, revealing beautiful lawns and greenery. The whole district looked like a garden. Obviously, not everyone could allow themselves to live here. Most of the locals were either reasonably wealthy or worked for the government. However, as far as citizens went, they were not of the highest ranks. There were other, much more affluent districts in the city, and the real elites, as well as most awakened, lived there. But that was one of the things Sunny liked about this place. He could do without being around other awakened all day, every day, or anyone really. It took him around 15 minutes to walk from the terminal to the desired address. Of course, Sunny could have reached it much faster by jumping through the shadows, but he preferred to not use his abilities outside of the dream realm and the academy. It made him feel more human. Finally, he stopped in front of the home that was going to be his and stared at it for a few minutes. The house in front of him was 2 stories high with gray walls and a slanting tile roof. It had a synthwood porch, a lawn, and a big window opening to the view of a spacious living room. There was even a garage for a PTV and a hedge fence to separate it from the neighboring homes. It was like something out of a fairy tale. Extravagant. Sunny breathed. A hum, awakened sunness. "Sir." Sonny was aware, of course, that a PTV had just parked nearby and that a man got out of it, approaching him from behind. He was just too consumed by the weight of the moment to show it. Turning around, he glanced at the person who called out for him. It was a short, overweight man wearing a very expensive tailored suit and an antique luxury watch. Despite his outward appearance, the man was full of confidence and had a wide, polished, professional smile plastered to his face. Sonny stared at him with a dubious expression, then said, "Leonard Wright." He ventured, the man, who was the representative of the agency responsible for outfitting Sonny's new home, nodded with enthusiasm.
"That's me. The fact that you have remembered my name is very flattering, sir. Really."
With that, he gestured to the home and smiled.
"How do you like it?"
Sonny hesitated, then feigned indifference and shrugged. "It's fine, I guess," he replied. Leonard lingered for a moment, then smiled even wider.
"Of course, a person of your caliber must be accustomed to much more luxurious accommodations, but I can assure you, you won't be disappointed by our work. This home might not be as high class as what you're used to, but we did everything per your specifications. Although, I must admit your choice of location gave us a challenge, especially with the need to keep the exact nature of the modifications discreet."
Sonny kept a straight face and tried to understand what the hell Leonard was talking about and who he thought Sonny was. To be honest, when he had decided to buy a home, he just contacted Master Jet, told her where he wanted the house to be located and a couple of things he hoped to fit inside, and instead of giving him advice on how to proceed, she simply arranged everything with a couple of phone calls. And now here he was. Meanwhile, Leonard glanced at him with a bit of curiosity, hesitated for a couple of moments, and then asked cautiously,
"By the way, if you don't mind me asking, sir, how does this beautiful house stack against your previous place of residence? I am interested from a purely professional standpoint, of course. Think of it as a client survey."
Sonny looked at the cozy gray home, thought for a bit, and then answered honestly.
Well, my previous place was about 100 times bigger, built mostly out of natural stone and marble, with antique wooden furniture and a very special secret dungeon. Oh, and security was taken care of by a fallen devil.
Leonard stared at him for a while with the same wide smile. His face, however, had slowly turned gray. After a while, he coughed a couple of times and said hoarsely,
"Wonderful, that's wonderful. Shall we take a look inside?"
The interior of the home was tasteful and minimalist, governed by a design philosophy that seemed stylish and spacious, and a little bit empty. The first floor contained a living room, a dining room, a kitchen, a pantry, a bathroom, and a guest bedroom. Everything was furnished and fully stocked, including a refrigerator that was stuffed with all kinds of expensive food. Leonard looked around with a sense of pride and went on a long tirade about all the hidden security features the unassuming house actually possessed. There were thick plates of armored alloy hiding behind the siding panels. The wide windows were outfitted with titanium shutters that could come down at a moment's notice, and both air and water filters could withstand not only the usual environmental toxins, but also most known forms of biochemical threats. Such extensive security measures might have seemed like overkill, but in fact, even mundane humans strive to turn their homes into compact fortresses. No one knew when the next gate would open and how close to them it would be. Even though most homeowners were never going to use these protective features, having them made for a big quality of life difference. Leonard spent a weirdly long amount of time describing all the lighting fixtures his agency had installed, his voice bursting with enthusiasm. It seemed that the man had a thing about designer lamps. Sonny didn't have the heart to tell him that he would not be using any of them most of the time. He could see perfectly well in the dark after all.
The house is connected to the city electrical grid, but there's obviously an autonomous energy source for emergencies. Spelltech, of course. Power units are easily accessible for purchase and last for a very long time.
By Spelltech, He meant that the autonomous generator was built by combining modern technology with awakened powers. The power units it required had to be either recharged or created by someone with a suitable utility aspect. Devices such as this were considered to be a luxury for the commoners, but in fact, a very large part of the city's infrastructure functioned on spell tech. Not everything in the world was created by the awakened, but almost all industries required their participation in one way or another. Even the air filtration systems Sunny's mother used to assemble in an underground factory on the outskirts contained fiber grown by one of the nightmare spell carriers. That was why, while utility aspects were often useless in a fight, people who possessed them were so valued by society. Sunny asked a couple of questions about the entertainment system built into the living room, scratched the back of his head after receiving the answers, and expressed his desire to see the second floor. The second floor contained the master bedroom and two smaller ones, each with its own bathroom and a brightly lit home office. There was also the latch to the storage space in the attic. Leonard described a few things about the furniture they chose, and then mentioned the soundproofing of the master bedroom several times for some unknown reason. Sunny frowned and gave him a strange look. "I mean, sleeping in peace and quiet is nice, but he does know that I can't sleep in the real world, right? What a strange man," Sunny muttered. Finally, they descended into the basement, which was situated deep underground, as well as being the most heavily fortified and well-protected part of the house. In a sense, this was the heart of the unassuming gray home. The whole basement was one large space, with walls, floor, and ceiling covered by heavy plates of armored ceramic alloy. This was done so that an awakened could train here without worrying about destroying their own home or alerting the neighbors. Sunny paid extra to make sure that every piece of training equipment here could survive his spars with Saint. He still remembered and mourned all the beautiful things he had lost during their previous duels, like his favorite table, or his comfortable chair, or his pride. The basement could be isolated from the rest of the house and from the outside world, turning into a heavily fortified, impenetrable alloy box. The reason for this level of additional security stood in a small alcove at the far end of it. It was a state-of-the-art, beautiful, incredibly expensive sleeping pod, the best money could buy. Sunny walked over to it and stared at the softly illuminated, luxurious cradle for a while, then smiled. "No more sore muscles," he murmured. In its closed state, the pod looked like a steel monolith. As far as high-tech coffins went, this armored one was a real beauty. Sunny couldn't even call it a coffin, really. That thing was a whole sarcophagus. With its help, he would be able to spend entire months in the dream realm without subjecting his physical body to any damage. He wasn't planning on getting lost in the spell for so long, of course, but it was better to be safe than sorry. Leonard chuckled.
I am not going to lie. Every time I find myself in such an environment, I can't help but feel a little scared. Have you ever heard about Dracula, sir?
Sunny glanced at him, then shrugged. "Not really. What is that?" he asked. The short man shivered.
Just a legend, thankfully. Dracula was a fiend that fed on human blood and slept in a coffin underground. Hence the...
Sunny smiled. "Oh, a vampire. Yes, I've met one or two," he remarked. Leonard grew pale, remained silent for a while, then squeaked.
"Met."
Not paying him any attention, Sunny turned to the second pod that stood near the first one. This device looked similar enough to a sleeping pod to be mistaken for one, but had nothing to do with sleeping. Well, not technically. It also had a cradle and a heavy lid, but unlike Sunny's new sarcophagus, it wasn't designed to accommodate a human body for long periods of time. In fact, there was a plaque on the inside of the lid advising people against overusing the equipment and asking them to behave responsibly. It was the best available dreamscape pod, allowing one to enter the advanced virtual reality simulation that existed on the edge between technology and magic. Sunny had big plans for that thing. Dreamscape was a place that was neither real nor a part of the dream realm, but instead existed somewhere in between. It was created and maintained by a combination of advanced modern technology and a very special aspect ability that a certain master, now already a saint, possessed. Their power had to do with illusions, and so that was what Dreamscape was, a massive illusion that countless people could share. However, that illusion was not entirely malleable and functioned according to a set of absolute rules. It reflected reality instead of being a complete replacement for it. As the result, a person entering it was bound by the same laws that existed in the real world. And since one of those laws was the nightmare spell, a person's aspect, abilities, memories, and echoes would function in the illusion the same way they functioned outside of it, with one important difference. One couldn't be hurt, wounded, or killed in the dreamscape. Neither memories nor echoes could be destroyed, which meant that awakened were able to battle each other there without having to risk their lives and keep the destructive force of their duels out of the real world. This application was the primary use of the dreamscape. Well, in a sense. At the dawn of it, the dreamscape was mostly used by the legacy clans and the government to train elite awakened that served them, but it was quickly deemed as only being marginally useful. While such training could facilitate safe duels between the human carriers of the spell, its simulation of the nightmare creatures was not that close to reality. The illusory monsters lacked the will and mind of actual abominations, after all. So, the dreamscape had failed to become a successful training tool and was thus largely abandoned. It had, however, unexpectedly found incredible success in the entertainment segment. Those awakened that were not part of elite strike forces deemed it to be very engaging, useful, and fun. The duels in the dreamscape became very popular, and that popularity simply exploded once the company behind it came up with the idea to integrate a broadcast function into the simulation pods, thus making these duels available to a much broader audience. The mundane humans. Today, Dreamscape was a whole industry with both amateur and professional leagues, famous celebrities, and passionate fan clubs. There was even a version of it for non-awakened, with its own set of environments and adventures that allowed people to experience a facsimile of what it meant to travel across the dream realm while battling nightmare creatures. Sunny, however, wasn't interested in the fame, glory, and money that becoming a renowned Dreamscape champion could bring him. No matter how lucrative, it was just a toy at the end of the day. He was, nevertheless, extremely interested in that toy for three very important reasons. The first reason was the anonymity that Dreamscape offered. It was all but impossible to track a person entering the illusion if they didn't wish to be tracked, which was very much to his liking. The second reason was Shadow Dance. Sunny needed to fight against a multitude of opponents skilled in wielding different weapons and using various styles to sharpen his battle art and make it, as well as the Soul Serpent, stronger. In a sense, he needed to create a library of mirrored styles to enrich his own. Was there a better place to find thousands upon thousands of awakened who were willing and ready to cross blades with him, all without having to risk his life to boot? The third reason was rather unexpected. In fact, Sunny had stumbled upon it by pure accident. Back when he had just arrived on the Chained Isles, he secretly tested the mantle of the underworld in battles against several nightmare creatures. The onyx armor had turned out to be even more remarkable than he had anticipated, so he easily hunted down several abominations. And yet, one creature had managed to escape from him after being thoroughly defeated, mostly because of the approaching crushing. That was when he discovered how the Prince of the Underworld enchantment really worked. Its description said that the onyx armor grew stronger according to the number of opponents its wielder defeated, and it did exactly that. The enchantment didn't care whether the opponent lived or died, all that mattered to it was that the enemy lost. After the nightmare creature Sunny had beaten escaped, the counter of the enchantment still changed from 12-15-6000 to 12-16-6000. He tested it in a battle with another abomination, bringing it to the door of death, and then walking away without delivering the last blow. The counter went to 12-17-6000. So, Sunny hoped to kill two birds with one stone in the dreamscape, to both elevate his technique and satiate the requirements of the Prince of the Underworld with a constant stream of victories. Now that he had finally bought his own home and gained access to a sufficiently secure simulation pod, the chance to do so was finally in his grasp. But first, he needed to send Lannard away. The two of them returned to the ground floor. The short man looked around and asked with a somewhat forced smile,
I hope that everything was to your liking, sir.
Trying not to show how weird it was for him to be addressed as sir, still, Sonny gave him a curt nod and answered evenly. Yes, it will do, he said. Lanard hesitated for a few moments, then said,
Good, great, Would you like to subscribe to our active security service? Many awakened find it beneficial to have a dedicated security team guarding.
The short man started to give him an obviously practiced sales pitch, but under Sonny's indifferent gaze, his voice grew quieter and quieter until eventually disappearing completely. Sonny smiled slightly. I would not, Lanard. Do you really presume to be able to guard me? He asked. Lanard gulped, then shook his head.
Ha, no, of course not. What I was thinking about, even. Please forgive me, sir.
He looked away, then hurried to change the subject.
In any case, as you can see, the interior is rather empty. We left space for you to fit your, things. If you don't mind me asking, when are the movers arriving?
Sonny stared at him, then shrugged. They're not. I don't own a lot of things, he replied, by which he meant that the clothes on his back and the stuff in his pockets were the total sum of his worldly possessions. Lanard sighed, then nodded.
How profound. Indeed, people these days are too preoccupied with material possessions. They define themselves through the ownership of things, not noticing that those things actually own them. I envy your wisdom, sir.
What on earth is that guy going on about? Sonny stared at Lanard's tailored suit and antique watch with hidden envy. Those had to be expensive. The short man caught the direction of his gaze and blushed with embarrassment.
Anyway, if no one is coming, then we can conclude the deal right here and now. I wouldn't want to take too much of your precious time.
They signed a few documents. All payments had been made in advance, so this was just a formality. But despite that, completing this meaningless ritual made Sonny feel a deep and powerful emotion. In a few minutes, Lanard was gone, leaving him alone in his new home. The first home he had in many, many years. For a while, Sonny stood motionlessly in the living room. Then he slowly wandered around the house, looking at its walls and tastefully furnished rooms. Finally, he found himself near the refrigerator and took out a glass bottle full of clear, pure water. With it in hand, Sonny walked outside and sat down on the porch. The terrace district was quiet and peaceful. The air was still cold, but the sunlight was already full of warmth, promising a vibrant spring. The wind rustled the leaves gently, and streams of meltwater murmured softly as they ran down the pavement. Sonny stared at the piece of land that he now owned and opened the glass bottle. He spent quite a while there, sipping water and looking at nothing in particular. As hours passed, several PTVs drove by. He saw a few people in clean and warm clothes. A bit later, droves of children and teenagers in school uniforms walked past on their way home from their studies. After that, he sighed, retrieved his shadows, and went back inside. Bringing the empty bottle back to the refrigerator, he stared at it for a few moments. Inside there was food, so much food, enough food to last him for a month, all easily accessible, delicious, and well within his means. Before Sonny knew it, his fist slammed into the door of the refrigerator, easily piercing the thin metal sheets and turning the vegetables stored on the other side into vapor. Pieces of metal and plastic flew in the air, and the whole house trembled slightly. The refrigerator itself cracked and deformed, nearly bursting apart from the force of the impact. Sonny stared at his hand in shock, then awkwardly retrieved it from inside the devastating device and looked at the broken thing with dismay. Crap, he cursed. Now he was going to have to buy a new one, and replace all the food, and clean up all the mess. What the hell is wrong with me? Sonny muttered, shaking his head. He put the empty glass bottle on the counter side, and went to find a mop. Sometime later, Sonny returned to the basement and approached the Dreamscape pod. He looked at it for a while, then turned around and paced around the armored dojo, frowning. Come on now. You've been preparing for this for a long, long time, he told himself. As he paced, his whole presence slowly changed. The way Sonny walked, the way he held himself, The way his hands moved all became slightly different.
There are 6 gods: the war god, also known as the god of life; the beast god, also known as the goddess of the moon; the sun god.
As he recited the names of the gods and their various aspects, the manner in which he spoke also changed. The difference was subtle but noticeable. One after another, Sunny changed every little bit of behavioral traits that could be traced back to him. He had spent a lot of time training for this moment, using the physical malleability of a shadow dance practitioner to make himself unrecognizable. Surprisingly, the task had turned out much easier than he had thought. It was basically his specialty, anyway. Weaver's mask could protect his identity from all who would wish to learn it through magic, but he had to deal with mundane forms of identification on his own. After a while, when he was ready, Sunny undressed, approached the simulation pod, and climbed into its cradle. As the polished mask of black wood appeared on his face, the lid closed. A string of shimmering letters appeared in front of him.
Enter dreamscape. Yes, no.
He sighed, then concentrated on the yes. A few moments later, his vision darkened. Sunny found himself standing in a boundless black void. All around him, countless stars burned with ethereal light, an inconceivably complex weave of strings connecting them together. There was, however, no logic or sense in the pattern. He didn't feel any meaning hidden in the beautiful weave of the strings of light. It was just a pretty backdrop and nothing more, a fake. Other than that, though, the simulation was pretty realistic. He looked down and saw his naked body. The soul serpent coiling around his arms and torso. The dreamscape recreated his appearance to the SMA, in great detail. Shaking his head in bewilderment, Sunny summoned the mantle of the underworld. It weaved itself from black threads and covered his body. As soon as it did, a pleasant voice resounded in the darkness.
Challenger, welcome to the dreamscape.
Sunny summoned the autumn leaf, a small charm that allowed him to change the color of his hair. After a short hesitation, he made them appear white. What next? How do I fight people? He asked. The pleasant voice promptly responded.
Before proceeding further, please choose an alias.
He blinked a couple of times, then scratched the back of his head. Oh, right, an alias. Sunny mused. After some, though, Sunny remembered the legend of Odysseus that Neff liked to talk about and smiled. Nobody, he said, that would be a good alias. He could already imagine how funny it would be to hear something like nobody has defeated the enemy, or nobody has won. His thoughts, however, were interrupted by the voice of the dreamscape.
Alias nobody is taken. Please choose another.
He did not expect that. What would be a better?
Alias of is taken. Please choose another.
What? No, wait.
Alias what? No, wait. Is taken. Please choose another.
Sunny shut his mouth, then thought for a while. His alias had to not only sound nice, but also be the opposite of what he would ever call himself in real life. Just like his movement and speech patterns, it had to be a part of the disguise. That's why coming up with one was not that easy. In the next few minutes, he tried a dozen different aliases, all to the same result. The level of coolness of the aliases he could come up with rapidly dropped, while the level of his irritation quickly rose. He felt as though the damned simulation was mocking him. Finally, Sunny growled in frustration and said the first word that came to his mind. Mongrel. He snapped. The dreamscape was silent for a while. Then it said,
Welcome, Mongrel. Please choose a dream of your liking.
Really, mongrel? Well, mission accomplished, I guess. This is indeed the last thing I would want to be known as.
Oh, the irony. As Sunny huffed and puffed from frustration, several images appeared in front of him. All contained depictions of different environments, although most looked like an arena of some sorts. From his research, Sunny knew that the choice of an arena decided what type of opponents he would get to fight against. Some were available to everyone. Some required a certain number of victories to be accessed. Professional duelists all spent their time in those elite dreams. Dreams. What a stupid name. If I was dreaming, I would be on the chained islands right now, wouldn't I? Sonny grumbled. His body was indeed awake right now. It's just that his mind was inside of an illusion. Regardless, what he needed was a place where he could fight sufficiently skilled amateurs without drawing too much attention. He knew just the place. Pointing at one of the images, Sonny said. "There," he said. A moment later, the black void disappeared, and he was suddenly somewhere else. A loud voice thundered from somewhere above.
Challenger Mongrel has entered the Colosseum.
Sonny was standing on the floor of a vast oval arena. It was covered by sand which had long ago turned red from all the blood spilled between these ancient walls. The merciless sun burned in the incandescent sky, and the smell of sweat, blood, and death assaulted his nostrils. A little disturbed, Sonny looked around and saw tall amphitheater stands rising high above the blood-soaked arena. Those were the spectator seats. A crowd was cheering from them, their voices full of macabre fascination. Cruelty and glee. Both men and women were dressed in archaic robes that left their arms and shoulders bare. With bloodthirsty smiles contorting their features, they looked like a horde of lustful demons. Well, not all of them. Here and there, a strangely clothed person could be seen, observing the fights with a less barbaric expression. The people in archaic clothes were illusions, while the rest were actual observers. One didn't have to be connected to the dreamscape to spectate the duels. But some quirky fans preferred to be there in person, to achieve the feeling of maximum immersion.
Lunatics, those damn simulation pods are too costly to use them for spectating.
Even though Sonny wasn't poor anymore, seeing such extravagance still pained him. Shaking his head, he finally turned his attention to the arena itself. Obviously, this illusory environment wasn't very original, but on the other hand, it was a classic. More advanced dreams had vastly different decorations, ranging from realistic to completely fantastical. But for this low-level one, the company running Dreamscape chose a pretty basic narrative. It was an ancient Colosseum. Place where slaves had once fought to entertain their masters, often to the death. Sonny didn't like it one bit. The Colosseum was based on a historical structure, but was much larger. Hundreds upon hundreds of warriors roamed the sand of the battle arena, some engaged in fights, some searching for an opponent. Out here in the Colosseum, most of the participants were awakened of high enough skill to be considered the elite among the amateurs, but not skillful enough to enter the professional leagues. Just what Sonny was looking for, maybe. Overall, while many of the duelists in the Dreamscape were talented fighters, at the end of the day, there were very few true masters among them. Real elites spilled blood in the dream realm, not in an illusion that had been conjured for the purpose of entertainment. So the level of competency of these people remained to be seen, commanding the soul serpent to assume the form of the fearsome Odachi. Sonny put the blade of the great sword on his shoulder and waited to be challenged. Due to his menacing black armor and fearsome mask, however, people seemed to be reluctant to approach, at least for a while. Soon, a young swordsman in a striking blood-red armor approached, a long and graceful espadon resting on his shoulder. With a smile, he looked at Sonny and said,
"Haven't seen you around before. Mongrel, are you new to the Colosseum?"
Sonny tilted his head and studied the letters that appeared around the swordsman. Paradise in red. Victories, 157. Defeats, 103. Lowering the Odachi, he answered in an even tone. The swordsman smiled, then stepped forward. The voice of the Dreamscape immediately spoke, announcing the start of the fight.
Paradise in red has challenged Mongrel.
They clashed on the bloodied sand, moving with enough speed to cause the wind to howl through their armor. Sonny had left one of his shadows on the ground and wrapped another one around the autumn leaf, where it could do him no good. He didn't want to be too strong so that his opponents were not completely outmatched and could properly showcase their styles. As for himself, he had completely abandoned both the flowing style that Nephis had taught him and the grounded technique that he had learned from Saint. Relying only on his ability to shadow the enemy's movement. Paradise in Red was not a master of swordsmanship, but his skill level was not bad. Still, the young man wasn't a match for Sonny, even though he had to forgo his practiced techniques and wasn't used to wielding the great blade of the Odachi. The material form of the shadow serpent was truly formidable, but due to its size and nature, using it required a lot of adjustment. It was potentially far more devastating than any shorter blade could ever hope to be, but at the same time, demanded much more skill and strategy to be wielded efficiently. Any strike it delivered was potentially deadly, but so was every mistake made in the process. Sunny prolonged the fight for as long as he could, learning as much as possible from how his opponent moved and wielded the sword. In the end, however, the strain of the duel turned out to be too much for the other fighter. He wasn't very strategic at how he spent his soul essence, so after 5 minutes or so, his speed and strength decreased sharply. Sunny sighed and ended the duel with one precise slash of the soul serpent. The great sword flashed across the enemy's neck, sending his head flying into the air. The beheaded corpse fell to the ground in a rain of blood, then disappeared in a stream of sparks. The voice of the dreamscape thundered from above.
Mongrel has won.
Too bad.
5 minutes was not enough to truly learn the essence of a battle style. However, Sunny was certain that he would face another practitioner of this battle art eventually. There were not that many popular styles among the amateurs after all. A few days or weeks later, he was bound to fight against someone with a similar technique again. Attracted by his flashy victory, a few more challengers approached. Sunny flourished the soul serpent, then stopped it abruptly mid-air. Drops of blood flew to the sand, leaving the dark blade perfectly clean. Under the mask, he grinned.
Ah, so cool. Good thing that I learned this trick from Saint too.
Are you even human?
Another awakened fell to the sand, blood flowing from his mouth. Sunny took a step forward and slashed down with the shadow serpent, easily cutting through the opponent's light armor and splitting his body in half. The great sword he wielded was truly devastating. As the corpse disappeared, he cleaned the curved blade of the Odachi with a swift flourish and answered with a dejected lie.
Humans, I am not and have never been a human.
By that time, a small crowd of awakened had gathered around to spectate the fights and wait for their turn to challenge him. Hearing his words, one of them laughed.
If you are not human, then what are you?
Sunny glanced at him, then shrugged. Internally, though, he was thinking, what the heck? In the past several hours, he had fought 27 people, and out of them, 25 had been using the same battle style. It was a practical, but rather simplistic art that relied on straightforward, efficient movements and attacks that were optimal in terms of lethality and energy expenditure, but for the same reason very predictable. In the hands of a master, the style could have been a real menace, but with these talented amateurs, it was useless against anyone with a tiny bit of clarity. Several of the aspects the challengers possessed had thrown him for a loop, but in the end, he had defeated them all one after another, gaining a solid grasp of the essence of their style by the 20th practitioner he fought. These people were not exactly untalented, but Sunny felt the difference between them and himself sharply. He had to remind himself that, unlike him, they had not spent a whole year fighting for their lives in the hell of the Forgotten Shore. Most of these young men and women had probably only experienced a handful of real battles in their entire lives, a few in the first nightmare and a few on their way to the gateway. After that, they lived in well-protected citadels and only ventured outside the walls in large cohorts, if ever. Although the counter of the Prince of the Underworld had grown by 27 victories, Sunny was slightly irritated. This was not what he had hoped for. He needed variety. He needed to create a truly versatile library of styles to allow Shadow Dance to be more efficient in the future. The more basic styles he learned, the easier it would be for him to shadow a truly unique technique if he needed to. As he was thinking that today was a complete bust, a sudden wave of whispers ran both through the crowd of the awakened fighters and the human spectators observing them from the stands. A dozen or so meters behind Sunny, a tall figure suddenly appeared out of thin air. When people saw the new arrival, their eyes widened. Leo Stryker appeared on the Colosseum and looked around with a bit of nostalgia. A few years ago, at the very start of his career, he had been a frequent visitor of this arena. This was where it all had started for him. Times had changed, of course. Using the few moments before he was recognized, Leo smiled widely and said,
"Well, did you really think that I would forget about the public Mondays, guys? Of course not. This is a sacred tradition. Sacred, guys. Some of the Strike Force veterans might remember how I started in the amateur arenas, and now that I'm a brilliant, famous, and incredibly handsome celebrity, I have to return here from time to time. To, stay humble."
There were currently around 20,000 people watching his broadcast, and pretty much all of them immediately exploded with a flood of mocking messages. Glancing at the broadcaster interface that Dreamscape provided to popular duelists like him, he grinned and winked, humored by some of the good-natured jabs thrown his way. Leo Stryker was not the most extraordinary fighter in the Dreamscape, but over these past few years, he had gathered a rather large following thanks to his skill, flair, and boisterous personality. He was so popular, in fact, that thousands of younger awakened became enamored with the battle style he and a few of his duelist buddies practiced. As the result, the Roaring Lion strike style had become all the rage among the amateur duelists, and his old mentor was now flooded by a deluge of new pupils. That fact really warmed Leo's heart. He was glad to be able to repay the old man for all his patience. Leo spent most of his days participating in top-level duels on the professional league arenas, but on Mondays, he liked to visit a public dream or two, chat with fans, fight a few amateurs, and provide them with pointers as a way to give back to the community. Today was one such Monday. Looking around the Coliseum, Leo noticed a small gathering a dozen or so meters away from him and headed over. As he walked, he heard excited voices.
Hey, isn't that Leo Stryker?
No way, wait, it's him. I can recognize that gorgeous armor with my eyes closed.
Leo, love you man, keeping it real like always.
Strike Force Roar. I've been watching your broadcasts for 2 years, Leo.
A friendly smile appeared on his face. Waving at several fans, he approached the crowd of challengers and glanced at the lone figure standing in the empty space in the middle. The man in the middle of the crowd wore a beautiful onyx armor that radiated a sense of solemn, dark menace. His face was hidden behind a fearsome black mask with 3 twisting horns rising from it like a jagged crown. His hair was stark white, and there were 2 pools of impenetrable darkness in the place where his eyes were supposed to be. His weapon of choice was a long, curved odachi forged of lusterless black steel. It rested on his shoulder, seemingly devouring the bright light of the illusory sun. The stranger looked more like a demon than a human being. Leo let out an approving whistle.
Also a broadcaster, I don't recognize those memories.
He checked the stats of the demonic warrior, Mongrel. Victories 27. Defeats 0.
But a talented one, a perfect KDA, what a rarity.
In any case, that guy was incredibly photogenic. A duel with him was not going to be interesting due to the gap in their skill, but it would definitely look stunning. Leo felt a little ashamed to break Mongrel's perfect streak, but this talented amateur would receive useful advice in return, which was far more useful. Who knows, they might meet again in the professional arena one day. Looking at the invisible camera, Leo raised an eyebrow and asked,
Hey, Strike Force, should we challenge that dark and handsome guy other there?
As the viewers expressed their approval, he approached Mongrel and gave him a friendly smile.
Friend, that's a big sword you got there. Do you even know how to use it?
Teasing the opponent was another sacred tradition of the Dreamscape, and Leo was rather good at it. Mongrel shifted slightly and faced him. The disturbing mask stared at Leo, making him shiver slightly for no apparent reason. Leo laughed.
You don't know how to use your sword. Well, would you like me to teach you?
The demonic warrior stared at him and didn't even move.
Dude, does he not know other words? Come on, work with me here, buddy. I am dying here trying to make this duel entertaining.
With a sigh, Leo stepped forward and unsheathed his own blade. The viewers once again exploded with a flood of messages, and at the same time, the voice of the dreamscape announced,
Leo Striker has challenged Mongrel.
Got him it.
Sunny stared at the young man in a beautiful azure armor, cursing his luck.
Why can't he get a hint?
Even though Sunny couldn't say a word of truth while wearing Weaver's mask, he tried to communicate his reluctance to fight this guy. To no result whatsoever. He didn't have anything against the new challenger. What did the dreamscape call him, Leo? But there was one problem. Just from the way the young man walked, Sunny could tell that he practiced the same damned battle style that everyone else here seemed to practice. And Sunny had more than enough of it for one day. His time in the real world was limited, so he really hoped to experience a more diverse collection of opponents before it ran out.
Maybe there's still hope. Maybe the next one is going to be different.
It was better to finish this fight quickly then. Sending the happy shadow from the autumn leaf to his body, Sunny lowered the shadow serpent and took a step forward. His opponent, meanwhile, smiled.
Let me teach you the first lesson. You should always.
And wear a helmet into the battle, fool.
Dashing forward, Sunny easily deflected Leo's blow and pierced his head clean through by continuing the same motion. As the corpse of the eloquent young man fell down and disintegrated into a rain of sparks, he flourished the odachi to clean it from blood, returned to his previous spot, and indifferently put it on his shoulder.
I swear to gods, the next person to challenge me better be using a different style, otherwise I might get angry.
Leo Striker found himself standing in a boundless black void, his mouth agape. His viewers, too, were uncharacteristically silent.
One strike. He killed me in one strike.
He lingered for a few moments, then turned to the invisible camera and forced out an awkward smile.
That was really unexpected, right, guys?
Then his smile grew wide and sincere.
Force is what people call finding a diamond in a pile of dung. Incredible luck. Yeah, definitely a stroke of luck. Oh, by the way, has anyone clipped it?
Leo sent the clip to a couple of his buddies and waited in the dark void, chatting with the viewers and laughing about his terrible performance in the duel against the demonic newbie. Just as he had expected, his friends joined him in the dreamscape almost immediately after receiving the message. Yes, his defeat was rather embarrassing, but there was an opportunity in every disaster. This was going to be a very special broadcast, a rare and bombastic crossover episode. Answering the invitations, two figures joined him in the black void. The viewers grew silent for a moment, and then sent so many reactions that the broadcast interface almost crashed. Well, as expected. Both guests Leo had invited were very prominent duelists, at least as popular as he was himself, or perhaps even more. One wore a heavy plate armor. There was a castle engraved on its breastplate, and 4 dragons depicted on his pauldrons and vambraces. This was Taoist Safer, a renowned swordsman who possessed a powerful aspect that allowed him to control fire. The other was a taciturn warrior in a gray silken robe. His alias in the dreamscape was the Fool, and he was known to be one of the most peculiar and persistent duelists in the professional league. Leo grinned.
Hey there, Safer. Hey there, Fool. Long time no see.
Safer scoffed, then pointed at him.
Leo, my friend, what the hell was that? You got killed by an amateur in one strike.
The Fool simply shook his head and remained silent. Leo coughed in embarrassment and looked down.
Well, it's not like the two of you never tasted a piece of humble pie, is it? If I remember correctly, Queen Bee decimated both of you just last week.
Safer grinned.
I am ready to be killed by our noble queen every day, but a newbie, come on.
Leo shrugged, then pointed to his sword.
All right, but there's a reason the two of you arrived so quickly, right? You saw it too.
The two duelists glanced at each other, then slowly nodded. Leo turned to the camera and smiled brilliantly.
You battle geniuses have noticed it. Well. It's this rare moment when I get to mock my dear viewers and their insufferable expert advice.
He gestured to his friends, then continued.
For those Strike Force veterans who still remember the early days of my broadcasting, as you might know, these two distinguished gentlemen are actually not only my colleagues, but also disciples of the same cranky old man who taught me swordsmanship. Basically, the three of us are childhood friends, and we practice the same ingenious battle style, the Roaring Lion Strike style.
He paused, and then sighed mysteriously.
It hurts my pride a little to have been defeated by an unknown novice. The real reason why I was so shocked by our duel is, you won't believe it. Oh yeah, before we do this, I should mention the sponsor of today's.
Safer rolled his eyes and interrupted him.
Cut it, Leo. What he was going to say is that the masked guy used the Roaring Lion Strike style to defeat that dolt. And while there are many, lots and lots, really, people who can beat that loud nuisance in a heartbeat, the fact that someone done so while using our own style is very interesting.
Leo glanced at his friend with vitriol, but then gave up on the ad break and nodded.
So, the three of us are going to go and see who that mongrel really is, and what is he really capable of.
Sonny felt that something weird was going on in the Colosseum after he dispatched the young man in azure armor. The other awakened seemed to stare at him with a bit of confusion, shock, even. The same went for the human spectators in the amphitheater. Many had changed seats to get closer to him.
What's the matter with all these people? Did I go overboard and move too fast?
But no, he had measured his dash to not appear too powerful. Maybe they just liked the spectacle. Sonny was, indeed, giving them a good show. Not that doing so was his intention.
Anyway, why is no one challenging me? Stop wasting my time, people. I'm on a tight schedule.
Indeed, no one in the small crowd of awakened that had been waiting for their turn to fight him seemed willing to step forward now. Sonny stared at them in boredom for a few minutes, trying to understand what was going on. They had been very eager just a few moments ago. No. Then someone finally walked toward him, unsheathing a formidable-looking sword. The guy was wearing plate armor with an intricate engraving of a castle and 4 dragons decorating its polished surface. He looked strong, noble, and experienced. The same style. He was obviously practicing the same damn style. As Sonny's eyes narrowed, the voice of the dreamscape announced,
Taoist Safer has challenged Mongrel.
Before the guy in plate armor could even attack, Sonny unceremoniously bashed him in the face with the pommel of the Odachi, swiped his foot, and then viciously thrust the tip of the great sword into the narrow crack of his visor. As blood flowed from the steel helmet, the voice of the dreamscape thundered once again.
Mongrel has won.
The faces in the crowd grew a bit pale.
What the hell is wrong with these people? Is there no one here who knows a different style?
Before Sonny could even clean the blade of the shadow serpent, a new challenger approached. This one was wearing a gray silken robe.
The fool has challenged Mongrel.
The bastard was wielding a heavy saber and using the same cursed battle art. Sonny let out a low growl and dashed forward. The fool turned out to be more nimble and aware than the last 2 fighters. He managed to sidestep the attack. Sadly, it had turned out to be just a feint. Before he could correct his footing, the Odachi pierced his chest and exited from his back. Sonny tore the great sword out of the enemy's body and stepped back in frustration. The man in the gray silken robe swayed and stared at the growing red patch on his silk garment, looking up at Sonny. He silently gave him a thumbs up, then collapsed to the sand in a rain of sparks.
Mongrel has one.
Curse it all, do I need to go to a professional arena to find a proper opponent?
These people were not exactly bad fighters, the three last ones especially. But why on earth were all of them so similar to each other? Sonny looked around and noticed that the Colosseum was deathly silent. Everyone was staring at him with strange expressions. He scowled behind the mask, a terrible suspicion entering his mind.
Is this whole arena meant for practitioners of a single style? Was I breaking some unspoken taboo this whole time? That would be a bastard move. No, wait, that doesn't make any sense. I was using the same style as them.
Suddenly, a familiar face approached him from the crowd. It was the young man in the azure armor, Lion Beater, or whatever.
No, oh gods, please no, I don't want to fight him again.
The young man stopped a few meters away from Sonny, hesitated for a few moments, then smiled and asked in a light tone.
Oh, my friend, if you don't mind me asking, what are you even doing here in this amateur arena?
Sonny rolled his eyes behind the mask. The answer was really simple. He was here to learn. But he couldn't say that, of course. He was also too frustrated to come up with a creative lie. Staring at the young man, he allowed the soul serpent to disappear and become a tattoo again, then said somberly,
I am here to unlearn.
Lion Beater blinked a couple of times, then shifted his weight slightly, clearly intending to unsheath his sword. With an irritated huff, Sonny commanded the dreamscape to eject him from the arena and disappeared from the Colosseum in a shower of white sparks. Climbing out of the simulation pod, he stared at it with resentment, then suddenly flinched and grabbed his hand with another.
No, we don't want the refrigerator accident to happen again, not to this beautiful, shiny, extremely expensive pod. Right, I should probably go and get some fresh air. Try it again next time on a more challenging arena.
With that, he threw the last glance at the high-tech device and walked away. What Sonny did not see, though, was the crowd of awakened back in the Colosseum, all staring at the empty space where he had stood a minute ago. Leo Stryker stared at it, too, a thoughtful expression on his face. A few seconds later, he said quietly, Sonny salvaged some food from the destroyed fridge, had a very late supper, and went down to the basement again, this time to travel to the chained aisles. By then, all shadow essence he had spent during the duels and to keep the mantle of the underworld from turning back to stone had already been restored. Wearing the onyx armor required a constant flow of essence to maintain the leaving stone enchantment active, and with the soul serpent assuming its weapon form. Sonny couldn't use the shadow to keep the expenditure to a minimum. Wearing the mantle for prolonged periods of time was rather draining. However, it was also a perfect way to train himself on how to manage essence most efficiently. He had no complaints. It was funny, though, that the dreamscape required a person to expend real essence despite being just an illusion. Climbing into his new, state-of-the-art sleeping pod, Sonny lay comfortably in the soft cradle and smiled. With that, he closed his eyes and very quickly fell asleep. While his soul wandered the dream realm and his body slept, locked in an underground bunker behind multiple layers of protection, though, several things happened in the real world. The clip of his short duel against Leo Stryker had unexpectedly gone viral. All around the planet, countless people watched it with a wide range of reactions. Some found it funny, some fascinating, while some simply scrolled past it as they watched their feeds. Even those who did not have any interest in the awakened duels found it striking, though. The image of an infernal wraith clad in black onyx armor defeating a charming, noble human warrior with one swift and ruthless strike was indeed very cinematic, just how Leo had predicted, even if, to his dismay, the roles had ended up being switched. What's more, even though Sonny had not even known that their fight was being broadcasted. He accidentally looked directly at the invisible camera right after cruelly putting the tip of his odachi through the opponent's eye. The image of the fearsome black mask staring emotionlessly directly at them, two pools of darkness hiding the eyes of the human being behind it, sent shivers down the spines of people watching the clip. It was chilling, arresting, and strangely hypnotic. Many of them had the same question after watching the clip on repeat several times. Was there even a human there, behind the scary mask? People who followed the Dreamscape leagues, however, had an entirely different reaction. Although they too appreciated the undeniable aesthetic value of the short and striking duel, they paid more attention to the actual meaning of it. How could a completely unknown novice defeat an established and well-regarded duelist, someone as famous as Leo Stryker, in just one strike? The exact moment when Sonny delivered the deadly blow was analyzed, disassembled, and put under the microscope. Was it skill or pure luck? Was it intentional or accidental? Did Leo make a mistake, or was his mysterious adversary just that much better? The answer was rather confusing. No one had the slightest idea. Obviously, once people became curious, they didn't stop on just that one viral clip. Rather swiftly, every fight and every word that Sonny had uttered during his infuriating visit to the Dreamscape were found and published for everyone to see. Once people saw the contents of those recordings, the whole duelist circle was violently shaken. One shock was followed by another, and then by yet another still. The first thing that people found during their investigation was 2 more short clips. One showed Mongrel killing Taoist Safer in the span of a single second. The other showed Mongrel killing the Fool, once again with a single ruthless strike. All in all, it took him less than a minute to easily crush 3 of the most renowned young duelists in the world. They weren't the absolute elite, but still some of the best the Dreamscape had to offer. The conclusion was obvious. His victory over Leo Stryker was neither lucky nor accidental. Mongrel was, indeed, just that much better. But how could that be? Was he some other famous duelist in disguise? People continued to dig, coming to a bewildering conclusion. The man who called himself Mongrel had never entered Dreamscape before that day. His profile showed only 2 pieces of information. Victories 30, defeats 0, and status offline. After that, many theories appeared postulating that Mongrel was, in fact, a master who had visited the Dreamscape to have fun. There weren't that many masters in the world, and all of them had much more crucial things to do than spend their time having illusory duels. Even if they did, however, those duels transpired in private arenas that were created specifically for the occasion away from the public eye. Still, if Mongrel was a master, that would explain it all. He was just much stronger. But he wasn't. That theory was debunked when the recordings of his other 27 duels were unearthed. After watching them, the investigating enthusiasts became truly shaken, and for a very strange reason. It was because those recordings showed Mongrel actually struggling against much weaker opponents. Now wait a minute. What the hell did that mean? How could a man struggle against novices, fighting them for an average of 5 to 10 minutes, and then kill 3 experienced professionals in 3 seconds? The answer was simply mind-boggling. While people who did not know much about combat techniques assumed that Mongrel had been just pretending to be weak, more knowledgeable experts came to a stunning conclusion. Mongrel only used the styles of his opponents to fight against them. He came into the Colosseum not knowing anything about the popular roaring lion strike style, and mastered it in the span of a single evening to such degree that even the Fool, Taoist Safer, and Leo Stryker himself, the 3 fighters who had popularized the style in the first place, couldn't resist him even for a couple of seconds. Now, it was the experts' turn to shiver, ironically. After understanding what exactly had transpired, they were left with the same question that the people who knew knowing about awakened duels had after watching the viral clip. Was the being wearing the black wooden mask even human? And all of them, regardless of their interests and level of knowledge about battle arts, were now wondering the same. Who the hell is Mongrel? In the absence of any new information, people had no choice but to look back at the existing recordings of Mongrel. Fascinated by the mysterious demonic warrior, they disassembled his every action and every word, trying to find some hint to his identity, background, and standing. Although there was not much to learn, they gradually came to perceive his sayings as rather meaningful. In fact, people ended up finding too much meaning in them, even though there was none. It was all just awkward lies Sonny had come up with on the spot to fulfill the requirements of the simple trick. He had never, ever intended to say something profound. But when had good intentions ever stopped people from overcomplicating things? Without Sonny knowing anything about it, Mongrel had gained philosophy. Are you new to the Colosseum? I was born in the Colosseum. Sitting in a school cafeteria, 2 students stared at a cheap communicator, their eyes burning with enthusiasm. One of the boys frowned, then asked in confusion,
I don't get it. What does he mean? Isn't the Colosseum just a dreamscape arena? How could a person be born there?
His friend shook his head with disdain.
Idiot, don't you get it? Mongrel doesn't mean that he was born in the dreamscape. He means that he was born in battle. Those ancient gladiators were slaves, forced to fight to the death against their will. Aren't awakened the same? They are infected by the spell and have no choice but to battle nightmare creatures to survive. In a sense, all awakened were born in the Colosseum.
Somewhere in the outskirts, several workers had gathered together during their short break. Are you even human? What is a human? I am not and have never been a human. One of the workers shivered.
Scary. Do you think that Mongrel is actually a nightmare creature that infiltrated the real world?
Another shook his head, the first sighed.
Then why would he say that he's not human?
The second worker looked at the dirty tunnel of the industrial air filter, exhaust they were cleaning, then at his own calloused hands.
What the hell does it even mean to be a human? Do you think that you and I are really humans? No, you fool. That mongrel has more brains than you, I swear. He at least understands that just having 2 legs and 2 hands does not make you a human. He gets how it is.
The third listened to their conversation and grimaced.
So what? Yeah, he gets it, but I don't see him complaining. That guy took the hand he was dealt and turned himself into a damned sword demon. What have you done? That's the lesson he is trying to teach us, I think. No one will treat you as a human unless you behave like one.
Far away in the sleeper compound of the academy, a group of young men and women were looking at a screen. That's a big sword you got there. Do you even know how to use it? No. No, you don't know how to use your sword. Well, would you like me to teach you? No. One of the sleepers scratched the back of his head, then asked,
Why did Mongrel lie about not knowing how to use a sword? He is obviously a very experienced fighter, maybe even a legacy. Was he trying to trick Leo into underestimating him?
A girl standing near him chuckled.
He didn't lie. Why would Mongrel need to trick Leo? He would win against him fair and square regardless. No, there's a deeper meaning in his words.
The other sleeper raised an eyebrow. The girl smiled knowingly.
Only a boastful duelist like Leo Stryker would claim to know his way around a sword. A true master, one who battles nightmare creatures in the dream realm instead of playing games with pampered awakened in the dreamscape, would know that they have infinitely more yet to learn than they already know. That's what Mongrel meant. No matter how good he is, he understands that in the grand scheme of things, his skill and power are like that of an infant.
Her friend was quiet for a while, then asked,
If that's the case, then why did he say that he doesn't want to learn more?
The girl shook her head.
He didn't say that he doesn't want to learn. He said that he doesn't want Leo to teach him. The true enemy of an awakened is the spell, not other humans. That's why Mongrel doesn't want to be taught by battling humans, even if he has to. And also, if someone is strong like Mongrel, they can end a fight with one strike. But true strength is not needing to strike at all. Maybe that's what Mongrel wants. To become powerful enough so that he never has to bear his sword again.
And just a few hundred meters away from them, on her way to the Academy Hospital complex, A young woman in a wheelchair was staring at her communicator with an amused expression on her face. "What are you doing here, in this amateur arena?" "I am here to unlearn." This quote especially had become a topic of heated discussion across the network. Among the duelists, it caused a whole philosophical storm. Countless awakened were passionately debating its meaning. No one knew what exactly mongrel meant, but everyone had at least a theory. The only thing everyone agreed on was that his short statement hid profound, fundamental wisdom about the nature of combat and ways to become a master of it. Not Effie, though, looking at her communicator. She shook her head and said,
"To unlearn, that guy must have hit his head one too many times. What a dimwit."
Then she looked at the image once again and added,
"And also, what's up with that armor? It looks so familiar. For a moment, I thought that Sonny's echo has run wild. Ha, what a fun idea. The look on his face would have been priceless."
With that, she shook her head, deactivated the communicator, and continued on her way. Effie had more important things to do than waste her time thinking about mongrels. The rest of the world, though, apparently did not. Blissfully oblivious to the storm his visit to the dreamscape was causing back in the real world, Sonny opened his eyes on the altar island of the sanctuary. Because of how much time he had spent fruitlessly searching for worthy opponents on the Colosseum, he arrived on the chained isles much later than he usually would. The sunset was still a few hours away, and the sky was clear and bright. He was welcomed by the familiar murmur of flowing water, the rustling of leaves, and a cool breeze. Sonny flinched slightly and threw a resentful glance at the deep pool of clean water surrounding the small piece of land on which the altar and the ancient tree stood. During his first visit to the sanctuary, Saint Tyrus herself had brought him here from the real world. Both of them had appeared near the altar. There had been a small problem, though. Sonny had materialized a bit further than people usually did, and as the result, plunged straight into the pool instead of landing on solid ground. Not a big setback. However, in a moment of disorientation, he almost had a heart attack. Falling into water reminded him of his first minutes on the forgotten shore just too much. For a second, he had thought that he was back in that God-forsaken place. Ever since that day, Sonny never ended up in the water instead of on the soil of the altar island again, but the scare that first time had given him was still fresh in his memory. With a triumphant smirk, he left the white altar behind and headed toward the ring of tall menhirs. Now that it was day, the sanctuary looked more populated. Groups of awakened rested on the grass of the park, some discussing upcoming ventures into the wilderness. Some simply killing time until they were able to return to the real world. One couldn't just enter the gateway immediately after appearing in the dream realm. Perhaps because the soul wasn't able to withstand traveling between worlds too often. Perhaps because the spell did not wish for them to return too quickly, or perhaps for some another unknown reason. Awakened had to wait several hours before being allowed to use a gateway again. The exact time they had to wait was slightly different from person to person, but in general, it was somewhere around 10 hours. During these hours, those awakened who did not wish to risk their lives in the wild expanses of the dream realm usually went about their business or fulfilled their duties to the citadel. A lot of work went into keeping human enclaves in the dream realm going. Apart from the obvious demand to keep watch on the walls and fight off attacking nightmare creatures. Mundane tasks like cleaning and preparing food were also shared among the inhabitants of the citadels. In a sense, each citadel was a settlement. Some were small, some large enough to house thousands upon thousands of the awakened. The population of the three great citadels was even higher, with hundreds of thousands of humans visiting them every day. The sanctuary was a rather tiny citadel, in comparison, so each of the awakened anchored here had to do their share of work to preserve it. Luckily, Sonny had been assigned a role of an advanced scout. In exchange for his reports about the things he noticed during his expeditions and the movements of nightmare creatures across the isles, he was all but freed from other tasks, only occasionally having to do a small chore or stand watch during the darkest hours of the night. He was rather happy with that situation. Sonny greeted a few people he was on somewhat friendly terms with entered the interior of the sanctuary. Then headed to his room. Now was a good time to finish the things he had not done during his last visit, namely, exchange the soul shard he had collected for memories or credits. Oh, and to properly study the ancient coin to draw and describe it for teacher Julius later. But the useless coin could wait. Right now, Sonny really wanted to satiate his avarice, unlocking the chest that stood at the foot of his bed. He fished out the soul shards off its bottom and unceremoniously threw them into the pack. The strange fruits he had gathered during his last journey also went there, leaving the chest more or less empty. Noticing the golden coin glinting between a few curios that Sonny had collected in the past 2 months, he hesitated for a moment, then shrugged, picked it up, and hid it under one of the puppeteer Shroud's vambraces. It was time to haggle. Returning to the park contained within the inner circle of the sanctuary, Sonny glanced at the awakened gathered there, walked over to a big sun-washed rock and sat down on it. Taking out the soul shards, he placed them on its surface and waited patiently, pretending to be bored and indifferent. It almost looked as if he was simply enjoying the sun while the soul shards had somehow appeared near him by accident. In the beginning, Sonny had to walk around and initiate trades, but by now, the inhabitants of the sanctuary had already caught wind of the fact that he often had soul shards to trade. Sonny just had to keep his trading operations seemingly humble, at least on the surface. If people knew how many nightmare creatures he really killed, things would become a bit difficult. He was known to be from the Forgotten Shore, which gave him a bit of leeway of how deadly of a hunter he could appear to be. But it was still wise to keep the full extent of his competency to himself. Of all the people on the chained island, only St. Tyrus and her trusted aides knew about his SS evaluation. So whatever soul shards Sonny didn't sell to the local awakened, he sold directly to the White Feather clan, leaving all parties satisfied by the arrangement. Soon, the first customer approached, looking at the gleaming crystals with burning eyes. Sonny smiled brightly.
"Oh, hey there, looking to trade for a shard or two? Well, you're in luck, my friend. Sonny's brilliant emporium is currently open for business."
If there was one thing Sonny missed about the Forgotten Shore, it was how scarce the resources out there were. As the result, the value of soul shards was way higher there than back in the real world. Well, the parts of the dream realm that were better connected to the real world, at least. Not that shards were cheap here. It's just that the deals Sonny was able to make were not as lucrative as the ones he had made in the Dark City. He was also not able to bring the soul shards back to the real world with him, which also affected the final price. In the end, the collection of crystals he had gathered during his last trip through the chained island, including those retrieved from fallen creatures, only landed him 3 memories of questionable utility. He fed them to Saint, bringing her shadow fragment counter to 163,200, after concluding his business in the park. Sonny went to the kitchens and traded the fruits he had found for a bunch of credits. The fruits were a very rare commodity on the chained isles. They could not be made into anything even remotely useful or advantageous, but some bright mind in the sanctuary had once come up with a method to make them into a very hard-hitting and tasty wine. Sonny himself had sworn off alcohol after his experiences on the Forgotten Shore, but he wasn't against making some money from it. In the early days of the sanctuary, the wine was all the rage among the local awakened. Not too long after it had been established, most of the man-eating vines that grew the fruits had been hunted down to extinction on the island surrounding the citadel. Now, only people who went further and risked their lives more had a chance to find several fruits, so the cost was rather substantial.
"That should buy me a new fridge, I think."
Sonny had only a very vague idea of how much refrigerators cost, but suspected that this recent exchange would be enough to cover the expenses of shopping for a new one. All in all, he was satisfied with the result of his recent expedition. He was progressing at a steady pace and slowly gathering everything he needed to make it even faster. Just in time, considering that Nephi's was days away from becoming a devil. With a slight frown, he exited the ring of menhirs and looked up. The trades took him several hours to complete, so it was already night. The crescent moon was visible in the dark sky, and the winds grew cold and forceful. Up above, heavy clouds were gathering. Suddenly, in a sullen mood, Sunny sighed and thought about his plans. Usually, he would be charting out a route for his next venture into the Isles, either going for a yet unexplored ruin or a habitat of the nightmare creatures he was preparing to challenge and kill. But these excursions took several days to complete, and he had a lot of business to take care of in the real world right now. He had only spent around 4 hours in the dream realm, but sometimes that was enough. For him, at least. Sunny had no idea why his experience with the gateways was different from most other people, but suspected that it was either because of his 2 cores or because of the fact that he had spent an entire year in this dead world even before becoming an awakened. Maybe the spark of divinity had something to do with it too. In any case, he tended to avoid returning to the real world too fast too often in order to not attract unnecessary attention. Today, however, he was willing to forgo extra caution. The things waiting for him back there were very important, or at least pressing. With a shrug, Sunny headed toward the altar island. Walking on the stone path in complete darkness, he looked up at the veil of clouds hiding the moon and sighed.
It's not like I would really want to venture out in the rain, anyway.
Approaching the white monolith of the altar, Sunny hesitated for a few moments, then put his hand on it. Nothing happened.
No, I guess it's too early after all.
What a disappointment. With nothing to do but kill time and wait for the opportunity to activate the gateway, Sunny paced a little, stared at the depths of the clear pool, then paced some more. Finally, he returned to the altar and grabbed the handle of the obsidian knife laying on its surface, purely out of boredom. Sunny strained every muscle in his body and tried to lift the damned thing, but no matter how hard he pulled, the knife didn't move even by a millimeter. However, there was no response. Giving up, Sunny grimaced and let go of the knife. As he did so, though, a heavy gold coin slid out from under his vambrace and fell on the polished surface of the altar with a melodic ring. It rolled a few times and then landed flat, the face of the beautiful person with the image of the crescent drawn on their forehead looking at him with a carefree smile.
So right, I have forgotten about that thing.
Sunny moved his hand to pick up the coin, but at that moment, the veil of clouds split slightly, letting through a beam of pure, pale moonlight. The light fell on the coin and made it gleam. A moment later, the surface of the coin suddenly shone with ethereal radiance. The features of the person etched on it became sharper, then disappeared into the light. When the light dissipated, the coin was gone. Sunny stared at the empty spot where it had been just a few seconds ago with a bewildered expression. It was then when the spell suddenly whispered into his ear.
Your shadow grows stronger. Your shadow grows stronger.
Sunny stared at the place where the coin used to be, then blinked. He dropped the coin on the altar. It was illuminated by the moonlight and disappeared. And then he received a shadow fragment. Holding back excitement, Sunny summoned the runes and read. Shadow fragments, 198 2000. The last time he checked, there was only 197. He had definitely, without a doubt, just received a shadow fragment from the strange golden coin.
So it wasn't an ordinary coin, after all.
A satisfied smile appeared on his lips. Not only was the coin special, it was even not cursed. On the contrary, it was blessed.
Well, that was the easiest shadow fragment I have ever received.
Suddenly, his eyes widened. Weren't there more coins he had left behind on the Iron Hand Island? 3 more, at least, had been swallowed by the dead monstrosity. Before the thought fully formed in his mind, Sunny was already leaving the altar island. The first one was that other coins could, potentially, turn out the same as the first one and reward him with free fragments. The second one was that where there were 3, there could be more. Much more. The fallen demon he had discovered could have come from a place where a whole treasure trove of miraculous coins was hidden. A whole mountain of them, even. If Sunny was right and managed to somehow trace the path the creature took before dying. Who knew how much more powerful he would become? Trying to suppress the giddy feeling of discovering a huge and tantalizing secret, Sunny left the sanctuary and headed toward the edge of the island. As the sound of waterfalls grew louder and the first drops of rain fell to the ground, a dark silhouette suddenly took a step towards him. It was one of the watchmen.
Sonny's right. Are you really going to go out in that weather?
Most of the watchmen here in the sanctuary already knew that he was comfortable in the dark, so their initial surprise about seeing someone leave the citadel at night had more or less disappeared by now. It was still strange for some of them, though. Sonny halted for a few moments, then smiled.
Yes, don't worry, I will be fine. I'm not going far anyway. Just want to check something on the Iron Hand Island.
The watchman hesitated, then shrugged.
All right, be careful out there. Night vision or not, this is not the time for humans.
Sonny thanked the man for his concern, then walked past him.
Not the time for humans. Good thing I am a monster then.
Approaching the edge of the sanctuary island, he didn't waste any time and summoned the Dark Wing. Sonny was tempted to simply turn into a shadow and rush toward his goal, but he didn't want to show his powers near the citadel so openly. Since the Dark Wing couldn't really allow him to fly, he glided above the chain for as long as he could, then landed on it and continued forward on foot. By that time, the rain was already falling rather heavily. The iron surface beneath his feet was treacherous and slippery, so Sonny had to be careful and watch his step lest he plummeted down into the sky below. He shivered, trying to think of a more terrible fate. With no means of real flight, he would just be falling through the darkness, endlessly, until his mind was gone and his body consumed itself from hunger, then slowly turned into dust. People on the chained isles loved to tell horrible stories about unfortunate souls who fell into the below. And Sonny could easily understand their fear. For that reason, he was very careful not to slip.
Only fools fall down knowing what waits for them below. I would never.
As though to answer his thought, a gust of wind suddenly crashed into him from the side, and a distant bolt of lightning illuminated the sky. Not wishing to tempt fate, Sonny dove into the shadows and continued his journey as one of them. Soon, he arrived on the Iron Hand Island. The severed arm of the unknown metal giant was still there, making Sonny wonder once again what force could have torn it off the creature's body. Judging by the size of that thing, the owner of the arm must have been of monstrous proportions itself, not really on the same scale as the walking colossus of the Forgotten Shore, but still undeniably gigantic. The remains of the winged demon that had swallowed the mysterious coins were there, too. However, they did not look the same. By now, only the bones of the fearsome abomination remained, all its flesh long devoured by the gluttonous scavengers of the nightmare world. The grass around the carcass was now higher, too, and had changed its color from the usual green to bright red. The grass looked satiated. Sonny grimaced. Out here in the dream realm, no creature or plant was really what they seemed. Otherwise, the thick forest on the island where he had battled the pack of fallen wolves would have been long ago destroyed by the crushing. Even the most innocent things were twisted, corrupted, and predatory. Without sufficient caution, even a blade of grass could be deadly. But he wanted those coins. Approaching the wide patch of blood-red grass, Sonny hesitated for a bit and then took a step forward. He felt the ground moving slightly beneath him, the rustling of the raindrops changing tone as they fell on the grass. With a deep frown, Sonny summoned the moonlight shard and circulated his essence, sending it flowing furiously through the coils of the soul serpent. He also collected both his shadows and wrapped them around his body. The grass swayed slightly and then grew still. A subtle smile appeared on Sonny's lips. Indeed, everything in the dream realm was dangerous and deadly, including humans. In fact, awakened were perhaps one of the most fearsome tribes of creatures in this world, if not in terms of raw power, then at least due to their cunning, wickedness, and unpredictability. For something as weak as a blade of grass, it was wise to avoid angering one of the awakened, especially one as dreadful as Sonny.
Oh, it feels nice to be feared.
With nothing threatening him anymore, he walked over to the spot where he had seen the coins last and bent down, trying to find the alluring golden discs. They were just where he had left them. The acid stored in the demon's stomach had melted the grass, but now, New blades were already rising from the ground, taller than before. It took Sunny some time to find the coins between them. The rain did not help either. But in the end, he discovered all three. The coins were identical to the first one. They were cast from gold and heavy, a beautiful wooden ship with a tree growing around its mast depicted on one side and the face of the mysterious stranger on the other. Hiding the coins in his pack, Sunny wiped the rainwater off his face and looked at the remains of the winged demon. In a flash of lightning, he saw the whole creature, red grass growing through its white bones, darkness nesting in the empty eye sockets, terrifying fangs crowding the massive, powerful jaws. Even in death, the creature looked frightening. Sunny muttered, wondering where the creature had come from, calling it ugly. With a sigh, Sunny looked at the sky, allowing rain to pelt him in the face for a while. Whatever little chance he had of tracking the flying abomination by following the trail of its blood was now gone. What else could he do? Closing his eyes for a moment, Sunny walked a few steps and retrieved a piece of gnawed wood from the mud. Just as he had remembered, it resembled a broken corner of a chest, with a strip of metal reinforcing the seam. Both the strip of metal and the wood itself had been violently torn from the rest of the chest. It seemed by the bite of the dead demon, which meant one thing. There had to be at least one chest full of mysterious coins somewhere out there, probably. But how was Sunny supposed to find it? The Chained Isles was a vast land, full of numerous dangers and hidden places. All he knew about the creature was that it had been mortally wounded by the dwellers of the dark side and then succumbed to the crushing. Speaking of the crushing, the rattling of chains thundered in the distance, announcing that the Iron Hand Island was entering the ascent phase. Sunny had to leave this place quickly. The next time he returned, the bones of the demon would most likely already be turned to dust. Gritting his teeth, Sunny walked over to the skull of the abomination and dislodged one of its fangs with a powerful kick. Picking up the jagged bone dagger, he studied it for a few moments and then put it in his pack. If all else failed, he would try to find an awakened with affinity to revelations and convince them to perform a divination upon the fang. There was one person capable of something like that on the Chained Isles. At least, but Sunny wasn't really willing to request help from that particular seer, not unless there was no other choice at all. He muttered that they were not there yet. Banishing the dark thoughts out of his mind, Sunny threw a last glance at the dead demon and the surrounding area, trying to see if he had missed a clue. However, there was nothing. With a troubled look on his face, he dissipated into the shadows and hurried back to the sanctuary. By the time he returned to the sanctuary, dawn was not that far away. Sunny snuck on the altar island and placed 2 of the 3 coins on the cold surface of the stone monolith, then waited for a bit. Nothing happened. Disappointed, he waited patiently for the moon to appear from beneath the dark veil of clouds. After some time, the sanctuary was finally illuminated by pale moonlight, and 2 coins on the altar immediately gleamed, reflecting it. Then they shone with a soft light of their own. The coin he held up in his hand, however, did not. A moment later, the spell whispered, its voice entwined with the rustle of the leaves and the murmur of flowing water.
Your shadow grows stronger, your shadow grows stronger.
Sunny smiled. He remarked that both the altar and the moon were needed. Hurriedly, he placed the 3rd coin on the altar and soon heard the spell repeat itself for the 3rd time.
Your shadow grows stronger.
Sunny mused that it should bring him to 201. And also, was he seeing things, or had the obsidian dagger moved ever so slightly? With a skeptical frown, Sunny tried to lift the damned knife, but just as before, nothing he did had any effect on it. He groaned in frustration and waved it off, muttering that it didn't matter. His recent discovery was enough of a reward in and of itself. He had received 4 shadow fragments, the equivalent of killing a fallen monster, without having to risk his life one bit. On its own, this amount was not that considerable, but what if he found 1,000? Or even a few hundred of these miraculous coins? What if he reached the treasury where the chest bitten into by the winged demon was hidden? That would change a lot. The problem was, Sunny had no idea where to look. Pacing back and forth, he thought for a while, and then said to himself that he should probably find an expert on all things Chained Isles. Somebody who might know about this type of nightmare creature, their behavior, and usual haunts. Somebody who had spent long years in this region of the dream realm and was friendly enough to talk to Sunny. He wondered aloud who he knew that fit into all these criteria. Sunny stopped pacing, lingered for a few moments, and then turned his head to the ring of massive menhirs. A strange expression appeared on his face. In the early morning, a lone figure approached the hallway leading to the White Feather clan's residence. Saint Tyrus and her people occupied the northern part of the sanctuary's interior. Sunny had no idea what went on there since he had never been invited, but he knew that both entrances to their compound were usually guarded. Today was not an exception. Before Sunny could step foot inside the hallway, a young warrior in a cuirass, decorated with etchings of hawk feathers, appeared from an alcove and glanced at him with a vigilant expression.
State your business, Awakened.
Sunny stared at the young man with an earnest expression, then smiled.
Oh, I am here to see Master Roan. He once told me to come find him if I need anything. So, here I am in need of something. Can you fetch him really quick?
The guard blinked a couple of times, then frowned.
What is this about, exactly?
Sunny grinned, lingered for a few moments, and then said honestly that it was about demon hunting. Sunny had no idea if Master Roan was currently in the sanctuary, but judging by the fact that the guard did not immediately send him away, he probably was. The young Awakened gave Sunny an evaluating look, then whistled softly and returned to his alcove. Nothing seemed to happen for a few minutes, but then, Sunny heard the sound of approaching footsteps. A young woman wearing a simple white garment appeared from behind the curve of the corridor and glanced at him, then gestured for him to follow. Sunny shifted slightly, then moved forward, walking behind the girl.
What would you know? I am walking into the lair of a legacy clan of my own free will. Never say never, I guess.
He had really never expected himself to do something like this anytime soon. Instead of walking further into the compound, they entered a narrow staircase and ascended to the very top of the sanctuary. There, massive stone monoliths lay flat on top of the menhirs, creating an almost uninterrupted surface. There was a whole separate world above the citadel as it turned out. Grass and moss covered the expansive stone circle, which stretched far into the distance. Sunny could see guards standing at the outer edge of it, keeping watch on the neighboring islands. Here and there, siege weapons were placed at irregular intervals, aimed at the sky. Right above the White Feather residence, a graceful structure was built on top of the ring of menhirs. With tall windows and beautiful ivy climbing its walls, it resembled a large stone chateau. The walls of the mansion were still wet from rain and shone softly in the light of the rising sun. A path led from its door to an airy pavilion at the edge of the stone monolith, with a round table standing in its center. The mighty griffin was laying near the pavilion, its head hidden under one of the eagle wings, while Master Roan himself seemed to be enjoying a hearty breakfast inside. The young woman gestured for Sunny to go forward and walk toward the mansion, soon disappearing behind its door. Sunny murmured that he guessed this was how saints lived. For a moment, Sunny was full of envy. The chateau on top of the sanctuary seemed so beautiful, simple, and peaceful. The complete opposite of the noisy, overcrowded, and poisoned world where humans came from. Of course, that peace was a lie. The dream realm might have seemed like a paradise sometimes, but that paradise was dire and twisted, hiding all kinds of horrors that were ready to descend upon you at any moment.
Whatever, my house is much better anyway. It has all a man can need and then some. I bet they don't even have designer lamps here.
Pitiful, really. Entering the pavilion, Sunny greeted Master Roan with all respect he could muster. The older man smiled and invited Sunny to seat with a relaxed gesture.
Good morning, Sunless. I must admit, I didn't expect you to seek me out so soon. Did something happen?
Sunny sat down, smiled politely, then shook his head.
Nothing that I would want to concern you with, you see. I am not here to talk about something that happened, but more about something that might happen.
Master Roan raised an eyebrow and laughed.
Don't tell me, wait, are you here with a business proposal? Am I about to become a customer of Sunny's brilliant emporium?
Sunny choked.
Who knows what? Where did you hear about that?
The handsome master grinned.
I hear things.
What are those bastards saying behind my back?
Sunny forced out a smile, then shook his head.
No, I am not here as a highly respected, rich, and famous entrepreneur, nor am I here as a well-regarded member of the wilderness survival faculty of the Awakened Academy. I am actually here as an advanced scout of the Sanctuary of Noctis.
Master Roan grew serious.
Those continue.
Sunny nodded, then hesitated for a bit, and finally said,
After we parted 2 days ago, I returned to the sanctuary. On my way back, however, I rested for a while on the Iron Hand Island, and there, well, I found the remains of a nightmare creature there.
The older man frowned slightly.
That's not unheard of. Iron Hand is usually safe, but you know how chained isles are. Nightmare creatures migrate, sometimes naturally, sometimes to avoid the crushing.
Sunny scratched the back of his head.
That's true, however, the abomination was a fallen demon. It is strange to see one that close to the sanctuary, and especially so because I have never seen or even heard about that type of creature. It was rather scary.
Roan's frown deepened.
A fallen demon on the Iron Hand Island, that is indeed strange. You've done well to bring me this information, Sunless. Did you get a good look at it by any chance?
Sunny sighed.
Well, you see, it was in the depths of night.
Then he smiled.
But luckily, I can see perfectly in the dark, so yes, I got a very good look, let me describe it.
He described the demon to the best of his ability, not sparing any detail. He even remembered every wound and injury on the abomination's body, hoping that their nature can shine a light on what exactly had killed the bastard. The longer Sunny talked, the darker Master Roan's face became. Finishing his report, Sunny glanced at the older man and asked,
So, what type of a demon was that, exactly, and why have I never encountered one before?
Master Roan shook his head.
You are lucky to have never met one of these fiends, kid. They are a very rare and vicious breed of nightmare creatures known as chain worms. Luckily, it was already dead. Otherwise, I doubt that we would be having this conversation right now. Even I am reluctant to face a demon such as this alone. No offense, Sunless, but if that thing was alive, you would have ended up as its dinner.
Sunny hesitated for a bit, then asked cautiously,
Chain worms, why are they called that?
The older man sighed, then looked at the breathtaking vista of the chained isles in front of them. After a while, he said,
It is because these creatures feed on metal. Once one of the heavenly chains is weakened, they appear from the dark side to feast on it. Steel weapons are useless against these abominable things, so fighting one, let alone many, is almost an impossible task.
Master Roan stared into the distance with a bleak expression, and then added darkly,
I've seen whole islands crumble into the below because of their hunger.
Master Roan grew silent for a few moments, then smiled after noticing Sunny's troubled expression.
The heavenly chains near the sanctuary are all fine though, so you have nothing to worry about.
That's not what I am worried about.
Sunny had already received a piece of valuable information that could help him find the mysterious treasure, but he wanted to know more. Before he could ask another question, however, a sudden shadow shrouded the pavilion, the stone chateau, and the expanse of weathered stone surrounding it, as though a cloud moved across the sun, hiding it. The sleeping griffin stirred and raised its head, its vertical pupils narrowing. Just a moment later, the shadow disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared. Simultaneously, a strange sound reached Sunny's ears. It was as though 1,000 wings rustled as they cut the air. Then, A woman was suddenly standing at the edge of the stone ring, her silhouette outlined against the rising sun by a bright halo. It seemed as though she had always been there, but Sunny could swear that there was no one near them just a second ago. Sunny breathed a quiet sound of surprise. The woman was tall and slender, her posture straight like an arrow. She was wearing a light steel armor, its pauldrons and greaves decorated with white feathers. Her long blonde hair was fluttering in the wind like a cascade of pale gold. When she turned around, Sunny saw two piercing amber eyes staring at him and shivered. Her face was cold and stunningly beautiful, more akin to that of a goddess than of a human being. The woman's pupils were narrow and vertical, exactly like those of the mighty griffin. The ruler of the sanctuary had returned home. Sunny cursed under his breath. With a shudder, Sunny forced himself to look away and hurriedly bowed. This was his second time meeting Tyrus of the White Feather clan, also known by her true name Sky Tide, one of the few saints of the human race, the demigod in charge of the Chained Island. Just by virtue of existing, the saint exerted a strange influence on everything that surrounded her. It was not oppressive, like the dreadful aura of Gunlog's golden armor, just different, as if the world itself was reacting to her. The blades of grass seemed to bend slightly toward her. The wind sang subtly lower as she approached, and even sunlight appeared to become a bit brighter in her presence. Master Roan shifted and rose from his seat.
Good morning, sunshine.
Sunny flinched.
On what?
It took him a couple of seconds to realize that the fearless griffin rider was addressing his wife, and not him. Sunny sputtered in disbelief at the word sunshine. Is that how he addressed a saint? Sunny reasoned that she was his wife after all. Once he thought about it, everything made sense. But still, the idea of addressing a transcendent as sunshine seemed very weird for some reason. Sunny cautiously looked up and saw a wide smile on Roan's face. Saint Tyrus herself, however, was as cold as ever.
Good morning, Ro.
Even her voice was cold and heavy, like the howl of an approaching storm. Turning her head slightly, Saint Tyrus looked at Sunny with a silent question. Countless poets would have been ruined if they saw the elegant curve of her eyebrow. Sunny stammered, catching himself and wondering what he was thinking about. Master Roan patted Sunny on the shoulder and said,
Awakened Sunless visited to tell me about a demon he encountered on the Iron Hand Island. It was a chain worm, already dead fortunately. Still, we should explore the nearby island, don't you think?
Saint Tyrus lingered for a few moments, then shook her head.
No need, the only failing chain on the Isles is far away from the sanctuary, connecting Shipwreck Island to the Twisted Rock. This is where the chain worm came from. I just saw it myself.
She turned away, then sighed slightly.
Of course, we will have to prepare. All islands are connected after all. After the Twisted Rock falls, its demise will echo through the entire region. Many islands will shift, causing changes to the severity of the crushing on others. The migrations patterns of the nightmare creatures will be affected too.
Sunny thought to himself that he should probably get going. Sunny cleared his throat, then said awkwardly,
It's been an honor to meet you again, Lady Tyrus. I shall take my leave then.
Sky Tide nodded indifferently, then said,
Thank you for informing us of your finding, Awakened Sunless.
He nodded, then rose from his seat and cautiously took a few steps away. When Sunny was almost out of the pavilion, however, the cold voice of the saint stopped him.
Wait.
He turned around and forced out a smile.
Yes, and how can I help you?
Tyrus looked at him for a few moments, then said in a calm, emotionless tone,
You come from the Forgotten Shore, if I am not mistaken.
Sunny nodded.
Yeah, and what about it?
The beautiful saint lingered for a second, then asked,
Song of the Fallen, do you know her?
Sunny asked why Cassie was being brought up. Sunny smiled. He added that they had met and asked why. Saint Tyrus looked at him for a few moments, then said,
Good, Song of the Fallen will be visiting the sanctuary soon. She will be glad to see a familiar face, I think.
With that, Sky Tide turned away, letting Sunny know that he was free to go. He hesitated for a second, then walked away. As soon as neither Master Roan nor Saint Tyrus could see his face, a dark expression appeared on it. Sunny muttered, wondering what the hell she was coming here for. Indeed, just like Sunny, Cassie had chosen Chained Isles as the region to anchor herself to. Their reason was most likely also the same: the proximity of the Isles to the Hollow Mountains. Luckily, she was not a resident of the sanctuary. Sunny had no idea how the blind girl had managed it, but she somehow convinced Clan Valor to let her and her cohort anchor themselves to the second human citadel in the region, the Night Temple. While Sanctuary was closer to the southern border of the region, Night Temple was situated far to the north, almost on the outskirts of the Misty Death Zone. For that reason, the two of them had been comfortably separated and had not seen each other even once in the past months. But now, that was about to change. Exiting the White Feather residence, Sunny grimaced. He muttered that he doubted it, hell. The sanctuary was slowly waking up. Now that the sun had risen, groups of awakened were preparing to venture outside, while those who had stuff to do in the citadel itself were going about their business. A few of them greeted Sunny as he walked toward the altar island. By now, he should have been able to return to the real world. After everything he had discovered during the night, there was a flame burning inside his chest that demanded action. His eyes gleamed when he thought about the mysterious treasure hidden somewhere out there in the darkness. But although Sunny was a very rapacious person, he knew how to keep his avarice in check. Well, most of the time. Sunny murmured about Shipwreck Island. Sunny had never been that far away from the sanctuary, but he had heard about that deadly place. The Shipwreck Island was situated almost at the center of the Chained Isles, far removed from both human sea idaidals. The nightmare creatures there were especially ferocious, and the islands themselves were far more bizarre and dangerous than those closer to the edges of the region. If one could somehow survive the crushing and look upon the Chained Isles from above, they would see that there was a vast empty space at the very heart of this shattered land. Some people assumed that this was where the ivory tower had once been chained, before all 7 of its anchors were broken. After that, the islands bordering the tier slowly fell into the sky below one after another, making it grow wider and wider. The hole at the heart of the Chained Isles was slowly expanding, and one day, thousands of years from now, it was probably going to devour the whole region. But Sunny had no interest in that remote future. What concerned him right now was that the Shipwreck Island was on the very edge of the tier, and as such, presented a lot of danger for a young awakened like him. If Sunny wanted to venture out that far, he would have to study and thoroughly prepare for a long and perilous expedition. And in the meantime, he had to hurry to the real world. Even though he felt the call of treasure with every fiber of his being, desperate to reduce the gap between himself and Nephi's, the things he had to do back in reality were crucial. Sunny muttered for himself to calm down that it was nothing serious, really. Approaching the white altar, he glanced at the obsidian dagger suspiciously, then placed his hand on the cold marble. Sunny added that there was no reason to worry. The lid of the steel sarcophagus silently opened, letting out beams of light and clouds of cool mist. Sunny yawned and climbed out of the sleeping pod, then stretched with a satisfied smile on his lips. His body felt refreshed and energized, as though he just had a long, perfectly comfortable sleep. Not at all like what he had to endure in the past 2 months while using cheaper academy pods. Sunny murmured that that was what he called money well spent. Indeed. The luxurious machine might have been the best purchase he had ever made. Not counting the mantle of the underworld, of course. Leaving the compact underground fortress of his basement, Sunny walked over to the kitchen, glanced at the broken remains of his fridge with a bit of shame, and retrieved a few ingredients to cook himself breakfast from the debris. Out here in the real world, it was currently early morning. He sent the happy shadow outside to observe the surroundings and then turned on the stove. Real eggs, real lettuce and tomatoes, real bread, real bacon, real coffee, real juice. It took him just a few minutes to cook himself a breakfast that would have been considered the epitome of a lavish lifestyle by any inhabitant of the outskirts. walking to a dining table that was too large for one person. He placed his breakfast on its synthwood surface and activated his communicator. There were no new messages, and he didn't really know what else to do with that thing. Usually, people of his age would have an active presence on the network and feeds breaking with all kinds of news, events, and videos, but Sonny had almost no digital presence whatsoever. Nor did he want to have one, really. He knew how to access various resources and services, of course, and many of the things on the network had once been the stuff of his dreams. The unlimited amount of games, books, shows, and entertainment of all sorts was on the tip of his finger. But ironically, now that Sonny had free access to all these alluring things, he had no time to dive into any of them. Right now, he had too much to do, and his dreams were filled with only clangor of steel and nightmarish abominations. Sonny murmured that maybe one day he would. Slowly consuming his food, Sonny used the communicator to quickly sketch and describe the coin he had found, keeping its true secrets to himself, of course. Outside, his neighbors were preparing to face the new day. The sun was rising above the giant city, and crowds of people were on their way to work. The shadow found a hidden spot on the porch of his new home and observed the quiet street from its shelter. It saw a few PTVs drive by, humming slowly as they rolled or levitated toward the exit from the terrace district. Several well-dressed adults walked by, heading for the public transport terminal. Sometime later, it was time for the students in school uniforms to follow them. Sonny sipped coffee and observed these children through the shadow, trying to imagine himself having such a life, waking up in a safe home, eating the delicious food a parent had prepared for you, not having to think about where your next meal would come from, going to a place where an unlimited amount of knowledge and mentorship was available to you, completely free, having no real worries and no real fears, just living. What a strange existence that would be. He stared at the students with a complicated expression. They were so soft. Their clothes were soft, their eyes were soft, and their lives too were soft. How were these children going to survive the real world? The real world was hard, cruel, and unforgiving, just like Sonny himself was. A person like him had a much better chance of surviving in such a world, not to mention the hellscapes of the dream realm. Finally, the stream of students grew thin. One of the last to walk past Sonny's house was a young girl of around 14 years. She was about as tall as him, with pale skin and black hair. The girl seemed to be a bit uncomfortable in her own body, like all teenagers tended to be, and the school uniform did no favors to her slender physique. Her dark eyes, however, were very sharp and clear. Luckily, unlike her brother, Rain seemed to have taken after their mother, who was a rather attractive young woman from what Sonny remembered. Even though she was still just a child, he could already see that one day, the teenage girl walking past his home was going to become a real beauty. Finishing his coffee, Sonny placed the empty cup on the table and sighed. Sonny murmured that he had found her.